The corner it'll go red. Hi, we're live.
Oh my goodness me! How
Looky
exciting!
that. Looky there. Looky
Look
there.
who that is! No, hang on. Look who that is!
See? You're still working on it.
That's it. I got to work this out. There he is. How you getting on, pal?
Look at you, some Cheap Trick today.
Hey, mate. One of the quintessential American acts for me. Wonderful, brilliant records. You know, just the very definition of great melody meets great rock and roll. You know,
I think one of my favorite things about them too was that, you know, they kept a hold of that for a long time, and still have put out music in the last decade as well.
Yeah, I mean, we played Ramblin' Man Fair with them a couple of years ago, and I was absolutely beside myself to meet them all, and sort of stood around backstage with Rick, and he is as nuts as you think he is. You know, yeah, he's absolutely brilliant. You know, he was just like everything I hoped him to be. He could have been, and more. You know, it was just fantastic. So we're having real good conversations, and funny enough, years ago in the Little Angels, I wrote. Or co-wrote a song with the guy that wrote The Flame, who was an English guy, and they literally just had that huge hit with that song. Yeah. And me and Jim Dickinson from Little Angels, we went to work with this guy. I forget this guy's name now, but he was an English guy and he lived in Richmond in London, and he was like a kind of low-level songwriter who happened to look out with this band that by that point, at that point, people forget, you know, that Cheap Trick really were a bit of a non-entity. They kind of disappeared a bit and they weren't really doing that well. And The Flame put them right back up, you know, and it was a complete, huge international hit, you know. So, yeah, well, we you know.
They had their album Standing on the Edge, which I thought was brilliant. There was some great music on that record. And, you know, when you say they kind of disappeared for a bit, you know, even though they had some popular stuff on that record, it wasn't a big hit because they had She's Tight right before that, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
And then, you know, that album came out and it really, I don't think it got the recognition that it should have.
I think you're probably right. I think they're one of those kind of strange bands for me that somehow aren't as big as they should be. You know, they've literally one of the greatest songwriting teams of all time, in my opinion. I think it's because they kind of strangely, it's maybe something that's kind of, I think it's something that afflicted Little Angels really, and also maybe not quite in the same way with Wayward Sons, in as much as that I've got a real interest in pop sensibility, and that kind of, I hate that term, but I'm very interested in the kind of popularity of music and how people have access points to it. And so inevitably, I tend to write melodies that are quite easy to listen to, and the lyrics are driven by a kind of the narrative sense of them are, you know, sometimes challenging, sometimes not, but really I'm trying to get people to have a conversation. And I think the thing is that sometimes falls between two stools, and I think Cheap Trick are a good example of that, because I went to see them play opening for Def Leppard a couple of years ago with my wife, and we went to see them play in Cardiff, and they were unbelievably good. I know that band quite well. I wouldn't say that I'm an aficionado, but I was so surprised how many songs I knew and how I knew the words, you know, and they were brilliant. I mean, absolutely brilliant. I mean, I think they've got I think there's 2 or 3 of their sons playing in the band now or something now. I seem to remember. Wow. But really amazing band. I absolutely love Cheap Trick.
And it's so interesting that you wear that today, because my partner and I on Go Game Go, my buddy Jeff, he and I were guests on another show last night, Devastating Just Cause, and he was talking about his time out in California and knowing Insane Cloud Posse and waiting to hang out with them one night on Sunset Strip, and here comes Rick Nielsen walking down the street. And he actually looked at them and said, "So do you know these guys?" You know, and they're like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Can you introduce me?" You know, and you're like,
"How mad?"
Sure, I'll introduce Rick Nielsen.
Rick Nielsen, yeah, right, yeah, funny.
To ICP.
He was great. I mean, he was. I found him to be incredibly engaging and very, very funny man. You know, it was just great. And they were brilliant that day as well at Ramblin' Man Fair. They were just fantastic. You know,
that's great. I did see them here live, and that was actually that's on my lightning round. I think actually they were one of my first concerts, not my first paid concert, but we went to see them at the state fair when they played.
Wow.
And
I wish we had. I often hear about the state fair thing in the US. I've often sort of thought, that's something that we never had. We don't have that sort of thing in the UK at all. But I love the idea of that, and I read a lot of Stephen King, and Stephen King's always going on about state fairs and a lot of plots and things like. So yeah, no, I sort of have massive, I'm really, really jealous.
Well, dude, I'll once we get you guys over here, I had to get a little bit of
oh, good lad, yeah, okay,
chilling out at the end of the day.
Why not?
And of course with some AC/DC.
Oh, good lad, yeah.
Me pints. So, but yeah, no, I mean, if you guys are over here touring at the right time, they're all over the place during summertime, and then we've been to one in Arizona when my daughter lived out there, but Illinois State Fair is where I saw Cheap Trick and saw Jay Ferguson as well.
Yeah, no. Well, let's hope we can get over there sooner than later. Then,
yes, this is the beginning right here.
Absolutely, pal.
That's
absolutely.
The beginning. Yes, and I have my new swag on.
Oh, good lad, good lad.
I'm all ready.
There'll be plenty more of that coming. I mean, we've. I presume we'll get into talking about all this, but the album's done. Thank goodness. It's been one hell of a journey. I mean, it really has. It's been extraordinary. But I mean, I'll let you ask the questions.
I appreciate that. It's all coming. But folks, this is Toby Jepson. I've been very fortunate to have made acquaintance and had time to spend together in person over in Europe last year. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but he's with Wayward Sons right now. He's been doing a lot of his own solo work as well lately. The COVID thing has brought him a whole new level of, I don't want to say a whole new level of creativity, but you turned the gas on. So we'll talk about a lot of this stuff. He's really made a way for himself through this interesting journey. Time of journey. So if I knew how to do the signals, I'd do it. So anyway, I sent him because I do lightning rounds in my show, as everybody knows, of all the millions of viewers out there. And they've been interesting. The first time I did a lightning round, Tommy Tallarico kind of chuckled at me because he loves to talk. And he's like, go ahead, do a lightning round. We'll see how long this takes. Took about an hour. Mike LaPon from Symphony X. I think it took us 30 minutes to do a lightning round.
Okay.
And with Keith Michaels from Tango Down, it was our show. So
well, you know how I like to talk, so maybe we might be here all night. So.
Well, I decided this time with me and Tobe that maybe I give him a little heads up. So here we go. Top 3 desert island albums. Go.
Easy. Hunky Dory, David Bowie.
Yep.
Heaven and Hell, Black Sabbath. And probably Night at the Opera, Queen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think because I need the heaviness of Sabbath when I'm feeling pissed off because I can't find enough wood to make a raft to sail into the sunset. So I've got to have that. I don't quite know we're getting the power to run this sort of this machine to play this music, but I'm assuming we can just take that for read that that's going to happen no matter what, right? So because you're like, I have only enough room for these 3 albums on my listening device, and that's powered by the sun, right? So that's
right.
Let's get that in place first. So we haven't I haven't constructed some sort of small timber equipment where I've got some small rodents to run around on a wheel to create the panel.
The way you've handled this past year, you could probably figure it out.
I probably could, but no. I think those 3 albums would cover me for every eventuality. It would be narrow because I've missed out the greatest band in the world ever, in my opinion, the Beatles. But the reason why I haven't included a Beatles record is because in a lot of ways I feel more indebted to Bowie than I do the Beatles for becoming an artist.
Right.
Yeah. Crafting
what they did and moving on with it.
Awesome. I think yeah, exactly. And I think, Bowie was clearly influenced by that movement anyway. So there's a sort of, there you go.
Which makes me think I've got something right behind me. I'm going to do some readings later on. That's going to be part of Hammer Away, is I want to do some book reading. And look what one of my first ones is going to be. Now, this is also an interesting thing for us who are music fans of even of these guys. Little Iron Maiden there.
Right, yeah.
And take a look at this book cover, which came out in 1976, because I think this is a first printing, if I'm reading the inside right.
Okay.
It's a paperback, so it's a first printing of a paperback. But it's 76. Notice the font.
Yeah.
But notice the font.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's very Maiden, isn't it?
And I'm like, wait a minute. This came out before the Maiden stuff.
Well, maybe Derek Riggs, who was the guy that invented that font, maybe he was a fan.
That's interesting. I'll have to look in here and see if there's any mention of it.
Weirdly, I watched that movie. I mean, I've seen The Man Who Fell to Earth a couple of times, and I mean, this sounds like ridiculous, but the town I used to live in Yorkshire is called Scarborough, which is a small seaside town, and we've talked about this before.
Yeah, that's where Mr. Dave lives.
That's right, and the whole thing with Scarborough is it's got this kind of very deep musical history. I mean, for instance, Robert Palmer, the great Robert Palmer, he was born and raised in Leeds initially, but then he went to live in Scarborough, and his mum and dad still live in Scarborough. So the whole that whole area of music to do with Robert Palmer and that whole movement, a lot of the musicians came from Scarborough and from Hull and from Bridlington and from that area because he engaged with them, and then they went on and had that success. Wow. But not only that, is that David Bowie's band, the Mick Ronson and all the guys from the original, they all came from Hull, which is just south of Scarborough. But the second guitar player was a guy from Scarborough. It was a guy from Scarborough as well, and he appeared on he was the second guitar player who played live with them. Yeah, and he was a sort of became a very famous musician from Scarborough. So we've got connections to Bowie there as well, randomly. And of course, the other thing is Chris Rea. All of Chris Rea's band all came from Scarborough and from the northeast, and so there's a real rich heritage of musicians came from that area. Yeah. And weirdly, John, the second guitar player that played in, I forget his second name now. I'll remember it in a moment. But anyway, this guy John, who played second guitar on the Spiders tour, he's famously in one of the big books about the man who fell to earth, and there's pictures of him on set. Because I ended up playing with his son, who was a guitar player, and his son sat on his knee next to David Bowie, so he's kind of like immortalized in that film. So that film became, when I was growing up in Scarborough and I was getting into Bowie and I was getting into all these things, that was one of the films that was always talked about. We were always discussed. And so I remember watching it very young, not really getting it, but then I watched it again maybe a couple of months ago. I got a Blu-ray version of it.
See, that's what I was going to ask. Yeah, go ahead.
Wacko. It's a wacko movie, but it is brilliant. I mean, you have to sort of suspend all belief, but it is a wonderful piece of work.
Well, see, that's what I'm wondering. Is it on? I mean, where did you get it? Did you get it through? Got
it online. I always like every week I do. Well, every day I seem to do. I want to get a delivery from Amazon these days, but
I know,
right?
I know.
I mean, how much money can those guys actually have? Crying out loud! I
don't know, dude. I hate to think about it.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? But I always like pump because I'm a big I'm a big cineaster. I love movies and I write film and all the rest of it. So I just put in Man Who Fell to Earth Blu-ray and it actually came up. I think it came from somewhere in Europe though. I think it's kind of it's not a sort of British print, but that is
But how much did you pay for it?
Wasn't a lot. I think it was about £17, so it's about $22, $23, something like that. Yeah.
All right, that does it. You're gonna have to get me a copy. Because if I'm looking on Amazon right now, and
Amazon America, yeah. I
think they have a collector's Criterion version.
That's it. Yeah.
That's $43.
Well, I think that's the one I've got. I'll have to go and if I could lay my hands on it, I'd show you. I don't know where it is at the moment.
No, that's cool. I get it. But they also have another one that's $126.
Woo!
I know.
Was it made of gold? Was it?
Or Make Me Breakfast?
It's a great film. It is a great film, unusual movie, but a great piece of acting. Actually, I think people always used to decry David as an actor, but actually, I think he was actually quite talented. He just never had enough opportunity, you know.
Right.
I think is it Goodbye, Mr. Lawrence, the Second World War movie that was set in Japan. Well, Farewell, Mr. Lawrence, or it was, I can't remember the exact title of it, but he's really good in that movie as well. I think he was an incredibly talented man all round, you know, obviously.
Wow. Yeah, I'll have to. I think I started to catch many years ago, probably on cable. I think I caught part of the movie, and at that time I wasn't ready for it, so I was like,
It is an odd one. Prepare yourself.
Kind of like the first time you watch Velvet Goldmine.
Yeah, that's an odd one, isn't it? Yeah,
yeah,
that's an odd one.
Yeah.
I like odd ones though. I like the odd ones. That's you know.
Yeah,
more interesting.
Yeah. They just have a place.
Yeah.
In which you watch them. But
that's right. That's right.
All right, favorite music-based movie. I think I know what it might be, but go ahead.
Well, goodness me, there's quite a few. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of movies that are biopics, for instance. I'm not really interested in that kind of thing. So,
well,
movies
it can range. I mean, you know, a music-based movie could be anything from a documentary because that's what grabs you, or could be what I think you're going to say, or it could be Rockstar. Any of these kind of movies.
Okay, well, that's a very broad church there.
It is a broad church,
Mr. Viking. So I'm going to say, I mean, the obvious one would be to say Spinal Tap, because it's just. I mean, I know that's probably that's now probably turned off half of your audience because I'm just too obvious. But there is something beautifully brilliant about, and so self-explanatory about the awesomeness of that film. I still think it is the single funniest film ever made, and not just because I'm a musician. It is beautifully realized, fantastically written, and because those guys performed that their role so amazingly as Americans doing British accents, which are the greatest British accents ever done by an American ever.
So in other words, I could study that movie.
I think I would study that if you're going to continue on this charade of talking like an Englishman, because even I can't talk like one proper because I'm from Yorkshire. But anyway, but I think Tap's pretty cool. I think it's always a good one. But I have to say, actually, I mean, there has been a lot of really good. I mean, I am a big fan. I'm a big fan of the movie Oliver, which is Lionel Bart's musical. Because I think Lionel Bart randomly, he's a really interesting character. He wasn't really a musician. He was just a brilliant songwriter who couldn't play an instrument very well, and so he used to sort of. It's a great story about how Lionel Bart, when he came up with a lot of the songs, consider yourself, all that stuff, right? When he was writing those things, he said he sat with his pianist, the guy, his mate, who was the real musician, and he would literally strut around the room singing the melodies, and the guy had to try and find where the chords were. And I love that because that's pure songwriting. That's not about
collaboration.
Yeah, and it's not about being brilliant on an instrument. It's about having an idea. It's about having a focused idea that you can actuate and realize. And I've always loved that film because I think the songs are fantastically realized. They are beautifully written. So I'd say that. Oh goodness me! I mean, how many can I have?
Well, you're good there.
Well, let's go with that. I'm going with that. I'm going with Oliver. I'm going with Tap, and I'm going with Oliver.
Because here's what else I'm going to say is, I love talking to you. So here's what I'm going to ask you. Sometime let's get back together and let's talk about, we'll do a session about music movies.
All right.
That'll give you a chance to look over, think about it, do a little, as you're just day to day, you're like, oh, you got to write that one down,
Well, funny enough, me and Dave Kemp, who you know very well.
I do.
We co-write songs.
He can be on that show too.
It would be brilliant because me and Dave have spent a lot of time in the last 18 months, 2 years, watching a lot of musicals because we're writing some songs for a kids' action movie at the minute. Excuse me, which is a musical based movie. So we've actually watched just about every musical ever created. Some of which are awful, most of which are awful.
Oh, I know. Oh God.
I mean, musical theatre. I mean, my daughter went to university to study musical theatre and acting and singing, and she's brilliant at it. But
Yeah.
I have a bit of a struggle with musical theatre, to be honest. I find it quite difficult. But there are good ones and there are bad ones, you know.
Well, you know what I was just talking about that to somebody yesterday because yes, I grew up in a theatrical family, and my mother was in a lot of plays. My dad was in some plays. The whole family was in a play once.
Wow.
And what I find is there's a problem sometimes with some of the classic ones where they're like, I've learned to tie my shoe. I'm going to sing a song about I learned to tie my shoe. And then the song finally ends. You're like, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Then they have a reprise of that. And they're like,
Right.
and I learned to tie my shoe. You're like, oh, good God, could we stop anytime?
Exactly. You've tied your shoe, now move on.
Move on. It has nothing to do with the story. You're killing me.
I know, mate.
So anyway, but one of my favorites, and I'm eager to know if you've seen it, is Once.
I know of it. I haven't seen it. I've got to be honest. No.
It's. I love the story of it, so you can check that out. I don't need to bother us with that right now.
Okay.
Your
cool.
first concert. What was your first concert?
Well, that's. I mean, do you mean? I mean, I thought about this one today.
You went to a concert when you were a kid. What was your first concert?
Oh, right. Well, okay. Well, that's kind of different then because, goodness me, I'm gonna say Ian Gillan because it was Gillan. It was Gillan on the Magic tour. Hull City Hall. I did experience a couple of other live bands, but they weren't through my own volition. They were just things that I kind of happened to be at when I was a child. So I'm not going to say those. So that wasn't me going to a concert, if you know what I mean.
That's how I feel about Jay Ferguson and Cheap Trick. Those were the first concerts I went to as a kid. I went with the family.
Point of going. Yeah. So
the first concert I went to was Judas Priest.
Wow, that's a good start. Well, I mean, I felt I had a good start, but it was kind of a strange gig because I'd formed a rock society at my school, my secondary school, which I suppose you'd call your high school. And I was about maybe 13, maybe 12, 13. And we'd only just kind of got to school. I'd only been there a couple of years. But the English teacher, Mr. Ward, who is the guy that I'd always hold up as the guy that was the only person I can remember at school that did anything of any note. He was brilliant to me, and he was a big rock fan, and we formed this rock society. He formed it with me and a couple of other friends, and we ended up taking a minibus of kids of our own age, down to see Ian Gillan at the Hull City Hall. I forget what year it was now, but it would have been early 80s type of thing, right? So we go to this gig, and we go into this beautifully ornate theatre in Hull. Very famous theatre. Bowie had played there. All these, everyone had played there. Incredible, ornate, sort of. I would have think it's probably Edwardian English, Edwardian theatre. So proscenium arch, beautifully built, colonnades, everything, all the stuff. So we go into this theatre, and I'm absolutely beside myself with excitement because I've got all the Gillan albums. Glory Road and Future Shock are some of the greatest records ever made, as far as I'm concerned. Brilliant records. And I love Gillan from Purple. He was my hero. One of my heroes. So I go into this place, and I swear to God, Stuart, there must have been, if there was 200 people in a place that held 1,800, I'd be surprised. So we were sat at the front, literally 3 rows from the front, with hardly anyone in this theatre. And the band came out, and they played an exceptional gig. It was like one of those gigs where they were like, well, we don't even care if no one's here. We're going to play the gig, right? And that's what I learned a lesson. My first lesson of rock and roll was learned that night. No matter how many people are there, you play like you're in front of everybody, like 100,000 people. That's first lesson. And so I saw my hero he had his long tresses, and Yannick Gers was playing guitar for him.
Oh, that's right.
And randomly, I'd got into Yannick's original band. They're called White Spirit. And I don't know if you've ever come across the White Spirit stuff, but you should check it out.
I'm writing it down.
Yeah, White Spirit was his first band, and they were a kind of classic rock band. But it was a kind of precursor. It was kind of a bit purpley, but it was a little bit more progressive than that. They kind of had, weirdly, I mean, it didn't surprise me he ended up in Iron Maiden because it did have sort of flecks of that sort of new wave of British heavy metal thing going on. And so I was already very aware of Yannick as a player. Of course, he comes on stage with Ian Gillan, and there's John McCoy there, and he's Bib and Tucker, and they had these two girls dressed in fur bikinis singing backing vocals. It was just like everything you could have wanted as a young kid. It was absolutely unbelievable. So yeah, really, a really, really extraordinary night. And I wrote the song "Don't Want to Go" on the first Wayward Sons album about that experience, about going to that gig, and how the whole "don't want to go" is I don't want to leave. I think it's so amazing. I don't want to go, man. I want to stay here. I want to experience this for the rest of my life. So that was written about that in that song.
Wow, that is awesome. And I totally love that you said that about your lesson, because I've seen bands like I saw Tesla, and they had and then when they all broke up and did their own thing, Frank Hannon did Moondog Maine. And a friend of mine, a photographer, told me they were playing up in my hometown. So I went and saw them. The place was packed. Same place I saw Quiet Riot years ago with Kevin. It was the whole Metal Health lineup.
All right, brilliant.
Same club. Go there. Place is packed. I'm right up front. I even get to intro one of the songs. I was like, this is great. They came here to play. They played over at Pops, and 30 people showed up. But they played the show the same. And I've played shows to a packed house, which is not very big. I'm not saying that. I wish I was playing in front of a larger crowd like I experienced being in when watching you guys. But that's still coming. But it's still going to happen. And especially when I open for you guys. It's never going to happen. That's probably not going to happen.
Oh, yeah, you never know. You planted the flipping seed now.
That's it. See?
And see you. I know your game. I know your game.
So, but I'll be damned. They played that same gig, and I've been there where I've played in front of a bunch of people the house is packed. Everybody's happy to be there. You get done with Working Man by Rush, and the place erupts, and you're like, I'm at a concert. This is weird, and I'm on stage doing this. Wow. And then I've played to, I've had those moments playing to the people working at the bar putting chairs up.
Yeah.
You're like, well, I still rock out. I still do the same show as best I can. So
can I give you a bit of an anecdote about that, which I've never, this is always my funniest experience of this exact thing. When Little Angels were doing their first rounds, and we were getting off our feet, off our knees rather, onto our feet and becoming a band, and and we were starting to sort of push ourselves out from Scarborough and getting into the environs. We got a local agent. It wasn't a national agent. It was, I don't know if it's the same thing in the US, but we have these like local agencies that would take care of a local region and they were
we have that too. Yeah.
Okay. So but they were very, very prevalent, very much more so than now, perhaps, I think, really, back in that particular period. So I'm talking mid-'80s, late 80s. And we picked up this guy from Leeds who was an agent, and he used to get us these random shows. He'd ring me up and go, right, Tobe, I've got you 3 shows this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. One's in Hartlepool, one's in wherever else, and we go to these places, and you literally you took your life in your hands. Half the time, there's always a fight. There's a sort of, or they were empty. It was either the fight or they were empty. It was never nothing in between. So we ended up at this place in this place called Sutton in Ashfield, which is a kind of like an industrial, so in the heartlands of Britain's aged industrial heartlands. So it was to do with the potteries and all that sort of thing when way back in the day. But it was a kind of very sadly defunct area, very poor area. But of course, every little of those little areas in the UK has a little thing what they call a working men's club, which essentially is a place, where anyone would play. The promoters at these places were local guys that were part of this whole system, this working men's club system. And so we got this random gig, and we turned up at this place, and I swear to God, it was literally just a room, I don't know, 50-foot square with this really low stage, and at the back of the hall. And the guy opens the door to us. He goes, "Right, come in, lads, set your gear up." So we get set up and all that. And I'm looking around thinking, I wonder when they're going to bring the lights in. I wonder when they're going to bring the lights in. And because of course so we and the PA. So anyway, of course, the PA turns up, which was just like a vocal PA on 2 stands, So I'm thinking, all right, well, okay, we'll deal with that. That's fine, we'll deal with that. Then I said to the guy, I said, have we got any lights? He goes, what's wrong with that one in the ceiling? And it was literally a bare bulb in the ceiling above the stage, right? And this was our light. And so I went, well, how does this work? And he goes, well, I turn it on and off. Right? So he literally, for the whole of the show, had his hand around the door jamb on the light switch, turning it on and off. And that was our light show for the night. But the funniest thing about it was, it literally was the very personification of the one man and his dog watching us. It literally was a bloke in a long raincoat with a dog on a lead watching us. That was our audience, as well as the bloke turning the switch on and off. I've never forgotten it. It was brilliant.
Did the dog at least bark?
Well, I think they left halfway as well. I don't even think they stayed. It was absolutely awesome, I can remember ringing this guy up the next day, the agent, and said, what did you put us there for? And he said, I can't understand it. He said, normally they're really good on a Tuesday night. I'm like, so if that's them really good on a Tuesday night, what's bloody Saturday night like? Oh, it was awful. We got dressed in our spandex, put our bullet belts on. We were there, rocking out, doing the job.
Well, you know what I call that? A paid dress rehearsal. That's what I call that.
It was beyond. I mean, we just honestly we joked about that gig for years and years after, because it was just like we could have just. It was like, well, there's no point being here at all. I mean, we can't even see ourselves because the light show's so rubbish. Every time we turned the light off, we did it where we were playing. It was just, oh my, it was hilarious. Good, that, isn't it? Oh goodness.
Oh Lord, I don't know if there's any reason to go on with the show. You just topped it.
Great.
Oh my God. I've only had one beer too.
I'm not making a word of this up. That actually happened. I mean, you couldn't make that up. It was just.
I mean, I've done enough and had enough silly crap happen that I get that. I mean, we had 5 people jammed it. I pulled up to a club one night to play. I was sitting in a band, and my buddy was out. He was out of town, and I'm sitting in for him. And I pull up to this club. I'm like, this can't be the place. It's so dinky. And we had to cram into a space and have the mixing board on the other side by the pool table with a door in between where people were walking through. But it was a great night. It's a great night.
Exactly. And every experience, like I always say to bands, when I'm doing my mentoring stuff, it's like every experience is a good experience. You should never look at any experience as a bad one when you're in a band, when you're playing, and if anybody takes notice of you, if anybody is cool enough to hang around at the end and say, guys, I thought that was great, that is what you need. That's your ammunition. That's your fuel that drives you forward to keep on doing it. And the very fact that you're able to find this place in your head and in your heart to be able to still stand on a stage when there's a bloke switching the light switch on and off to illuminate the stage, and the fact that you still consider it to be important to play that show, that's the thing.
That's
the thing. And so that's what I rely upon. I've always remembered that those, and we had lots of those kinds of gigs, but that was the kind of the epitome of it, really. That was the ultimate version.
That is the epitome. That is it. That's the what do they call it? That's the standard on which you build everything after that.
Oh my! Listen, you couldn't go any lower. I mean, that was about as low as whale shit. Believe me, that was low. But it was really important,
All right, lads. If you look here, you'll notice here we have whale shit. What is above that? So
how much lower
from here is good.
Well, unless the whale's over the Mariana Trench and it goes right down, then hey. Oh goodness, good fun.
Well then,
yeah, and relax,
and take the moments.
Yeah,
and here we go. So, what of all the concerts that you had gone to, what would be your favorite concert?
Oh, the one that always comes to mind is when Little Angels opened for Guns N' Roses in London. We were. I think I might have talked about this before, but please stop me if I'm getting boring. But
well, you haven't talked about it here.
Okay. So we got very friendly with the guy that ran the Marquee Club in Wardour Street, which is a world famous venue that Led Zeppelin played at. Everyone played at the Marquee Club in Wardour Street in London. It was the premier place. And we were very lucky because when we were becoming a successful act or starting to become a successful band, we were at that point where record labels were wanting to see the band play. Yeah. We were getting lots of gigs at the Marquee Club, opening for other major bands, and we got very into the favourable sort of side of the guy that ran it. And there was this guy called Bush Telfer, he's called, very famous guy in British music business because he instigated the success really of the Marquee Club in the late 80s because it became a place where it kind of became a punk venue for quite a while and then sort of lost its vibe a bit. And then as the 80s rock and roll scene came back, that kind of guitar music, it erupted and he booked everyone. So
because Iron Maiden was pretty, that was a mark in their history too, right? At the Marquee.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, they played there. I mean, they used to play the Rifkin Arms quite a lot in London, which was quite famous, and the Walthamstow Royal Standard. And we played those places too, but the Marquee became a bit of a home for Little Angels. And over a course of one summer, pretty much, we opened for, and these bands were not successful at the time. They were just coming through, right? So literally in a series of about 6 or 7 weeks, we played every Sunday night. So we had to drive down from Yorkshire down to London. And we played and we opened for Tesla on their first time they ever played in the UK. We opened for Guns N' Roses on the first time they ever played in the UK. Faith No More the first time they ever played in the UK.
Wow.
And that happened over a very short space of time. It was like the promoters were bringing them all in. Now we went down to play. We got the call from Bush, the guy, saying, "Look, we'd love you to come and play open for this band. This band are coming in from the US, and they're called Guns N' Roses." So I did my normal thing. I went straight down to my local record store and asked my mate Chris, "Who are Guns N' Roses?" And he said, "Wow, man, you got to listen to this. You got to check it out." So he put on the first single from Appetite, which was "It's So Easy." No, it's so easy. Yeah, that was the first one that was which was released in the UK. It might have been different from America.
Right.
He puts this single on in this little tiny record store called Studio One that I used to frequent every weekend, and it absolutely blew me away. I thought this is like, because I was such a big punk fan, it sounded like the Sex Pistols mixed with Aerosmith or something. It was incredible. Right.
Good call. Good call.
Yeah, really, really cool. So I said, "Oh, we're going to go and open for this band this weekend." And I went to see him on the Friday or something. And he went, "Oh my God, you're going to have such a great time. They're going to be huge and all this sort of stuff." So we go down and we're in our little green van and we get there. And what I can remember of it, Stuart, was we used to have to park around the back of the Marquee Club. And around the back of the Marquee Club was like a loading bay, but it was a fire exit. But it was always full of rubbish and it stank to high heaven of beer and food, and it was horrible, you know. But we were allowed to park our van there, but they always used to have the doors open. They had to have the doors open. And I can remember getting out of the van and I can remember hearing this noise. And I've never heard anything quite like it. It's like the loudest thing I've ever heard in my entire life, you know. And we walked tentatively down this little fire escape corridor. And there was this guy wearing a top hat, stood in front of these Marshall stacks. There must have been about 6 cabinets and 3 heads, playing the loudest guitar I've ever heard in my life, screaming at the guy at the front of house going, "Man, turn it up, man. I can't hear it, man. I can't hear it." And we were like, "What the hell's this all about?" You know. And I remember Steven Adler had a cymbal on a stand in the middle of the auditorium, and it wasn't a very big place, the Marquee Club. It maybe held 450, something like that. But I remember he was stood there, and we all stood around the edges. We didn't know what to do because there was all this stuff going on. I remember there was a fight between the road crew and one of the members of the band. I think it might have been Duff McKagan had a fight with someone from the road crew. So we were like, "Oh my God, who are these people? They're mad." You know, it was all a bit like that. So anyway, I tentatively crept up to Steven Adler and I said to him, "Oh man, you know, oh, great to meet you guys." And he went, "Oh, hey," he was really friendly. He's like, "Oh, how's it going? Who are you guys?" And he's asking us all these questions, and we was just got on with him, and it was really, really cool. And so they did their sound check. We loaded our gear in, Well, they didn't really do a sound check. This is the point. It was so haphazard. It was like they got up and played a bit of half a song, and then Slash shouted at Izzy, and then Izzy stormed off, and it was all like that. You know, it was like, this is going to be a disaster. They're going to be awful. This is going to be terrible. We're going to blow them off. We're going to absolutely slaughter them. They're never going to be better than us. We were a bit like that, you know. So, of course, we go and do our gig, and I swear to God, Stuart, I have never seen a club so packed in my life ever. And I've never, ever experienced, to this day, an atmosphere in a club of anticipation of seeing a band.
Wow.
It was incredible. So we played our show. We went down really well. We weren't booed off. It was, you know, there wasn't just a bloke with the one switch. It was a big, it was all great. You know, lights were cool. The sound was brilliant. We did a good show. I remember thinking to myself, follow that, you bastards. Right? Right? But, okay, so I then got dressed, and we weren't allowed to use the dressing room because they had the dressing room, and the dressing room, the support band's dressing room was the bog, of course. So we get dressed and we get back into our civvies, we get back out, and I go out to watch this band. So I stand out in the audience at the side of basically kind of at the side next to the get stage right.
Sure.
And they came on, and to this day I have never seen a more visceral, more connected, more rock and roll, more focused show in my life. It absolutely leveled me. And it didn't just level me, the entire audience. I remember this. You know what I remember about it? I remember this tall punk rocker with a mohawk down the middle of his head, stood in the middle of the audience with his mouth open like that, watching him. Because he couldn't believe what he was watching. And I felt the same. I can still remember. It still gives me goosebumps thinking about it. I can remember the hairs on the back of my neck standing up to a point where I was like almost breathless with excitement watching this band. And they only played 50 minutes. They played 50 minutes. Two songs of which were covers. They did Mamakin, and they did Knocking on Heaven's Door, of course, because that was one of their classics, right? So... Right. But what I remember about it, Stu, and this is why it is the greatest concert I've ever been to, is that I didn't know any of the songs. I didn't really know it so easy. I'd only heard it the once.
Right.
But by the time they'd finished each of those songs, I was singing the chorus. And I thought I'd known those songs all of my life. That is the measure of a great band who can really write songs. And it absolutely killed me. I couldn't believe how amazing it was. It was just... And I'll just, if you want me indulging me a little further, because this is really important.
That's what I'm here to do. Indulge the rockers.
So so the gig finishes because we're part of the show. We stay in the venue and they kick all the audience out, and we're sort of like by this point, all of us were leveled by this gig. I mean, I can't speak for the rest of the band, but I remember us all being like, oh my God, that's the greatest thing we've ever seen. And so I crept up to the dressing room. And I knocked on the door really quietly, and the door's whipped open, and there's Axel stood there in a fur coat and his bandana. Yep. And I went, I was taken aback by him because he's quite a tall dude, actually. You know, he's actually not a small squat. I remember him being tall. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe I was on my knees. But anyway, right. So
we won't go any further with that.
Exactly. Right. So he comes to the door and I goes, oh man, look, we were the support band. And I really, really just wanted to say what an amazing gig that was. He goes, let's go to the bar, man. Let's go to the bar. So we go to the bar. So I'm with Axel. I don't even know this guy. I mean, I've just seen him sing on the stage, but he's blown me away. So we stood at the bar, and he gets a drink in, and we're having a little natter about stuff. And I didn't know what to ask him, really. But I remember saying to him, how'd you get that good? I didn't know what else to say. And he went, man, you know what? He said, when I first went to California and I've met these guys, and we just rehearse. And he said we had this roller door lock up in the valley somewhere, where hell it would have been, and he said we lived in there, and we built little bunks, and we barbecued outside the front of the roller door, but all we did was we just played until we were ready. Till we were ready to go out and let ourselves out into the world, And he said then we knew we wrote and wrote. So, and all of this is going in. I'm like a sponge, I'm just soaking it up, And there's a couple of great things. We then get in the van to go home, and I swear to God, right, you could have heard a pin drop.
Oh.
Not a single word was uttered the whole way home because we were all thinking the same thing. Oh my God, that was a real band. We're not a real band. They were the real deal. They were absolutely the real deal. And we went back and we changed everything we did. We stopped rehearsing 2 times a week and we rehearsed 5 times a week. And we started upping our ante. And that experience of seeing Guns N' Roses and opening for that band the first time was the singular thing that created Little Angels into the band that we were, in my opinion, because we changed the way we looked at it all.
Right.
And the coda to all this is the funniest thing is that years later when we ended up headlining the Marquee, well, about a year or so later, we started headlining the Marquee Club because we got our deal and we were doing well. First time we ever went into the dressing room, this is true. It was sprayed on the wall, which was famously a big wall that got sprayed constantly by all the bands. It said Guns N' Roses 1, Little Angels 0. Like they'd blown us off. And they had, right? They had. So I always thought that was I thought that was like a feather in the cap. At least they'd spelt our name right, Sort of.
How'd they spell it? No, they got it right.
Oh, they got it right. It wasn't Little Angles. No,
they cared enough to get it right.
Well, I mean, maybe it wasn't them, but who cares? I like to believe it was.
That is a fantastic story. I have never heard you tell me that one before.
Oh, mate, it was pivotal, absolutely pivotal. And when I look back at my career, that stands up as being, not just the greatest concert I ever saw, but one of the greatest turning points in my life as a musician.
Yeah.
Really.
Yes. Because I've said it many times with there's 2 things that I talk about with bands, things like that when I'm starting a band and when you're having that meeting with everybody and you're like, this is how it should be.
Yeah.
Is when people go, well, I don't know if I want to learn a song that people don't know. And I'm like, hey. If you get up there and you play the song like you love that song, they will love that song.
Right.
But if you get up there with the attitude of, why am I doing this song? Nobody knows this song. Nobody cares. And you suck. And you might as well give it up. But if you play that song with all the heart that you play all the other ones and you sandwich it between something that they love and they love, put it in the middle and keep your damn mouth shut and don't go, so here's a song. It's one of my favorite songs from my favorite bands. And I think you're really going to like it. Go ahead, start it. If you do that, they're going to be like, shut the hell up and play the song.
Yeah, that's right. No, wise words, man. I think and it's the same when you're trying to present new material. I always used to kind of, I think when we got further and further into our album career as Little Angels, we got more and more confident about that sort of stuff because I think what we found is that, what you should be doing is you're the band, you're the one presenting the material, you're the one presenting the show. And it really should be driven by you. It shouldn't be driven by the audience expectations because they don't want that. They want you to be the ones that shows them.
Yes.
And so it's about confidence. It's about an assured approach to delivering a show that you hope that will engage everybody and they'll want to come back. But that can only happen in exactly where you're describing it, by being confident in what you're choosing and standing by your choices. Because, there's reasons why we choose, whether you're doing covers or whether you're doing your own original material. There's reasons why these songs get written. The narrative is important for me, very much so, always has been. You've got a narrative trail, you're telling a story, it's becoming something that you want people to buy into, and it's a lifestyle. You're selling a lifestyle and not just the entertainment. For me, it was all about selling the lifestyle and wanting people to take part in your world. And so give them your world. Don't apologize for your world.
Yeah. Oh, here's a quick question, here's my last question. This one through Toby. I gave him I cast it out there. Here's a funny one. Everybody can think about this, and I've got a new answer for your worst one. If you created the Magic 8 Ball, what would be the best answer and the worst answer? I think I've got a new worst answer for you.
Well, I tell you, I've thought about this quite a bit today because and I will admit, America or the world, but America probably. I didn't know what a Magic 8 Ball was. I was like, what the hell's that? So and now, but so of course, like Stuart being the gentleman that he is, sent me a link to YouTube so I could watch the little explanation of it. I'm like, oh, I've seen those things.
I know the Magic 8 Ball.
Oh goodness me, how stupid am I? So
that's how I wanted you to feel.
Right, of course, I know that.
I'm a
that's why
dick.
I love you, man. That's why I love you, because you're just always bigging me up. It's great. Anyway, so I thought about this, but I genuinely, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because I would say that the best answer you could possibly get, and I will explain this because it sounds too simple, but is the word yes. Because one thing that I had a sort of like a period of my musical career, going back maybe to about 2004, 2005, where I was totally in the wilderness. I didn't know what I was doing. I'd had a big successful career with Little Angels, and I'd left the music business because I'd got ill. I'd done all sorts of things happen. It was like a real terrible period of time, really. But we were having children, and so things were changing. So me and my wife were having kids. We're building a family, and we blah blah. So I was doing other things, but I found myself in this kind of terrible situation where I felt totally worthless as a musician. I didn't feel I could write anything anymore. I felt like I didn't have any direction. It was hard to try and figure out where the energy was going to come from to carry on, all those sorts of terrible things. And it was partly to do with the fact that, bringing up a young family saps you of energy, as you well know. It's one of those things, and you have to put all your attention to your family. Quite correctly, you do. And so I was kind of facing this uncertain future of what to do next. And I think I fell into a bit of, probably the only time in my life I fell into a bit of proper depression, and I don't mind admitting that. I think we all have these periods of time, right?
Yeah.
So I felt the black dog on my shoulder, and I remember my amazing wife, who's infinitely far better than I'll ever be in every single aspect of life, and
uber charming,
and really ought to be ruling the world.
She is ruling yours.
She's ruling mine. But anyway, she very quietly, and and I don't mean this to sound. I want to caveat this because it's important. That I'm not a religious guy, but I feel very spiritual. I do think spirituality is different from having a stock in trade religion or anything of that nature. Sure. I don't follow those kinds of things. I have my own personal feelings about that.
Sure.
But I think human beings, by very nature, are spiritual beings. I think that's part of what we are. That's my.
And I think within my belief, that's what allows you and I still to have a conversation.
Absolutely. Right.
It doesn't rule that, because in what I believe, we're supposed to talk. It doesn't matter what you believe. I'm supposed to accept where you are. So
totally, and I appreciate you saying that. But I think the thing is, I grew up, just again, just slightly off topic, but I did grow up in a very ultra religious household. Really, my mum was a devout lady, and she was a big Christian, and believed to the day she died that the Bible was the answer. And she was very quiet. She had a very quiet religion. She never believed. She didn't even go to church. She said she didn't think that churches were the places to go. She felt her church was within her. All these sorts of things, and she read the Bible every day. So, but I didn't believe. I didn't believe it. I don't believe it. It's not something I can't admit to believing something I don't believe in, and I don't. I think that's disingenuous. So anyway, but I do believe in spirituality. I believe that's part of the human experience. Mm-hmm. So my wife gave me this book called The Secret, and which is written by an American. Okay, and it has a quasi. I think it has a quasi religious aspect to it. I didn't really recognize that stuff at all because it's not something that I'm interested in. But I did get one of the biggest lessons from that book in my life. And what it said was, and it literally said this, it said, say yes to everything. And I thought to myself, what does that actually mean? Mm-hmm. And then I read the rest of the passage, and it said, do you recognize this? When someone rings you up and says, do you want to go for a drink? Do you say no? When someone says, do you want to go for a walk? What do you say? Do you say no? When someone asks you out to, I don't know, take part in going to a gig or whatever it would be, what are you saying no? And I realized I was saying no to everything that was offered to me. Mm-hmm. And it was a real realization. It was literally an epiphanal moment in my life. I thought, you know what? I've been saying no for the last few years, and all of that is negative energy. Yeah. And so I'm going to start saying yes. And every single time I was asked to do something, I said yes, no matter what it was. I mean, I'm not being silly about that. I'm talking about just normal life stuff.
No, right.
So someone said to me, "Oh, Toad, do you want to go for a drink?" let's do it. So we would go out for a drink, and my life changed overnight. It literally, within a couple of weeks, I was on the phone to people talking about music. I was being offered things. I was saying yes to those things. That thing led to another thing. The next thing, I'm thinking about making new music and starting to work. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think the word yes is probably singularly the most important answer to most questions in life, within reason, of course. I mean, I know
exactly.
there's, you know,
we have common sense. There's common sense that
exactly.
There's common sense on ground. Here's yes above that. You just
exactly right. So I think within the parameter of that, meaning the positivity things, then if you say yes, then that will lead to other yes things, and other yes things will become big things that have become successful. So, and I think that's, not just about making money or being successful in business. I'm talking about just human relationships.
Correct. And I think, that goes back to you earlier. Now I'm going to jump on you a little bit for this, because I think we've talked about this before.
Okay.
Because we've talked about luck before. And I think, I think about luck a lot, and I always kid people here in the States, because, we run around and Irish is Lucky Charms and St. Patty's Day, and, oh, it's all of that, good day to you, and all that, but when people think about it here too, they think about luck. And I always tell people here in the States, I go, I may be Irish, but I don't believe in luck, because all the things that you did and all of those moments with a guy flicking the lights and a dude standing out there with his dog for a limited time only in your audience, those aren't lucky moments. Those aren't moments that you look back and go, that made my career. But the fact that you were willing to be there and said yes, and you're at that venue and did a paid, who the hell doesn't want to do a paid dress rehearsal?
Right. And the thing is, here's the thing. When you're young, you tend to say yes to everything all the time anyway. It's only as you become a bit more jaded and you have like life experience that knocks you off your perch a bit, that you start to say no, because what you're really doing is guarding yourself, and you're trying to protect yourself from the possibility of other things going wrong. Yes. But the problem with that trail I found in my life is that the moment you go down that rabbit hole, there's no escaping that unless you start to turn. You've got to turn it round. And I agree. I don't believe in luck. Never have done. I think luck, but I understand why people use it. I understand why people use it as a kind of concept, because it is quite. It's just like lots of other aspects. I'm not superstitious. I don't have any sense of. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in the UFOs. I don't have any sense of that, because I think it's just we cover ourselves in these answers to almost like kind of the mysteries of life by bracketing them in crazy ways to basically, because it's easier to do that and less difficult to comprehend if we give it a name. And I think that's part of the problem with human experience is that rather than just sort of going, hang on, this is life that's just happened to me and I will deal with it on a daily basis.
Right.
It feels kind of nicer. And I do understand it. I think there's a kind of sense of, well, that's actually quite lovely that someone can say, oh, I had such great luck today. I found a lottery ticket on the floor and it won me $1 million. Well, the likelihood is that you might have turned a different corner and walked over that lottery ticket, and not even seen it. So I don't think that's luck. I just think that's happenstance. You know what I mean? It's just circumstances,
And I still believe things happen for a reason. And they happen when they're supposed to. Because
I would agree with that to a degree. I think, again, I still think that is to do with how you lay foundations in your life, though. You know what I mean? If you are,
and that's my point. Yeah, because you're making decisions, and yet there are moments, and that's where I sometimes I just have to look up and go, okay, thanks. In my belief, I just kind of look up and go, yeah, thanks, appreciate that. Because there's those times where I'm just like, how the heck did I even know this was going to happen? And how odd. And we do understand, though. I bet the more we talk, Toby, is that's what I enjoy, because the more we talk, the more there's that great little human aspect, that thing that we share, where you're. I don't know. It's a humanitarian thing. It's just a kind of a
exactly that is my position on all of these things. I'll be honest. I feel the world would be an awful lot better place if we stopped taking these kind of like these leaps of faith into things that don't necessarily, I think, help us. And I think it often gets, clearly it gets twisted by evil men. A lot of these things are twisted by evil people. And I don't even, I use the word evil with a bit of sort of reticence, really, because I'm not even certain I recognize that word as a way of explaining the way that people behave. It's just another bracket, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
right?
And I try to look at it as men with evil thoughts, because we all, where do we go if we just think people are evil? Where do we go if we think people, that's a bad person, that's a good person? We haven't lived their life. We don't know what they went through.
Yeah.
Any more than when we deal with something our way because of what we've been through.
Exactly. And I think that's very, very true. And I think there's, I wrote a song a few years ago for one of my acoustic EPs, which was called Shoes. And it deals with this very, very thing about how we walk past a beggar in the street, or, and we step over them. We don't, we turn away. We don't look them in the eye because we're embarrassed or whatever it is. And we draw, but what we're doing, we draw a conclusion from that situation. Whereas you haven't walked a mile in their shoes, unless you've walked a mile in their shoes, like my old granny used to say. You've got no right to judge anybody because you don't know what their lives have been. And I think it's I really, really think that's a very important thing to remember in everyday aspects.
Yeah. So what would be, based on what we laughed about earlier, I think I know what a good worst answer would be in your 8-ball.
Well, but the worst answer on my 8-ball I could think is put your tongue on it. So you never want to do that. You never just want to inadvertently put your tongue on anything, let me tell you. I mean, whether it's a battery or anything else, never give it a chance. That's what I say.
But how many of us have already done the battery thing?
Everybody, that's the problem.
The 9-volt.
Yeah, why did I do that? Yeah, I know. It's one of those kind of life's mysteries, isn't it? Like, you're looking at it, it's almost like a compulsion, isn't it? It's like, I'm not going to do it this time.
Can't. That's the way to know if it's still good. My answer would have been for you. Possibly the new one would be, that's whale shit.
That's whale shit. Yeah, that's a good one. Lower than whale shit, yeah.
Because if you remember our chart, where do you go from here? This is whale shit.
It's nowhere, it's just down. You can't go any lower.
Lower. You can go to 0 minus 1, maybe.
There is no lower than whale shit. There is no.
Still, one of my favorite lines is, well, I was just looking at it. Well, don't even look at it.
Don't even look at it. No. It's still got the old tagger on it. I know. I mean, and it's so. I mean, I know there's people probably raising their eyebrows out there, going, "Oh, shut up!" How many times have we heard the tapisms? But I swear to God, honestly, man, it's one of those things. It's like you can break the glass ceiling or the ice in a conversation with another musician, right? If you just have if you mention Spinal Tap, I mean, I swear to God, this happened, right? We played. I mean, I'm just remembering all these things. We went and did this gig in where the hell was it now? We played this gig in Warrington with the Little Angels when we were a nowhere band and we opened for someone, and we ended up in this flipping club, and the guy that was promoting it was an absolute maniac, and it was like, guys, you got to hang around, we're gonna have a party. So we get to this party and it's full of people we don't know, of course. We're all knackered from the show. He's got his bedding down in his bathroom. I'm sleeping in the bath. It's all one of those gigs, sort of thing. Yeah, right. And we go up into this room where this supposed really happening party's happening, and it ain't happening. It's like it's boring. There's like 2 cans of lager between 83 people. It's that sort of thing, And he goes, and we were trying to break the ice, and he went, why don't we sit around cross-legged and talk tap? Right, talk tap. And we all went
tap talk.
And the room came alive. It was like, oh, I love tap. That's amazing. And we spent the next 2 hours all sat around in a circle, all quoting Spinal Tap to each other.
You could have just reenacted the whole thing.
I know. It's like I didn't know any of these people. By the time the end of it, we were all hugging each other. Oh, I can't wait to see you again, man. It was all that nonsense, So I think tap's one of the great icebreakers, I've got to say.
Well, it wasn't a good icebreaker for Thomas Dolby.
Oh, pray tell.
There is a wonderful, you can look it up. I'll send you the link. there's a wonderful article out there with the 5 things that it was like 5 things that Thomas Dolby took home with him after his experience with Eddie Van Halen.
Right.
They got together because Dolby was going to do some programming stuff with him, and so he hung out with him for 5 days. And one of the things he says in there. Well, I shouldn't ruin it for you, but the one that I was going to mention. The one I was going to mention. Here's the one. I won't mention the other one, but here's the other one that sticks in my mind. But the one that he mentions in there is as soon as he showed up, he made a Tap reference, and Eddie just looked at him, and and it wasn't a good look.
Oh dear. And
he goes, "Bro, that's not funny, because it's like somebody just followed us around with cameras." And he did not like that. He didn't
like it. Ooh.
He's like, "No, it wasn't even funny," because he lived it. And he was like, and Thomas is like, "Oh."
I mean, it's kind of weird because I can remember when Tap first came out, and I remember like Lars Ulrich famously sort of like saying it's the worst film ever made and all this sort of stuff. It's taken the Mickey out of us. And I can remember that there was conversations going on about how people thought it was an actual documentary, you know, and all this stuff. So I can remember we saw it. I didn't go and see it at the cinema. I didn't see it at the cinema. We saw it on.
I didn't either.
I tell you what happened was they played it on. We had when I don't know if you remember on British television. We've got a channel called Channel 4, which is a very famous British TV channel, which now makes lots of really amazing movies, actually. Okay. But when Channel 4 first launched, it launched, I forget what year it physically launched. I think it was 1984, possibly. I might be wrong about that. But anyway, when it first launched, they launched the whole channel with a week of music programs. Really smart thinking. Because they played The Last Waltz was on there, which is another great music film, of course, and it was like a sort of incredible whole week of these music programs, and it ended on the following weekend with 24-hour music programming, right? So they had The Last Waltz on, they had loads of open air, loads of concerts, loads of famous like people being interviewed and all the rest of it. And one of the things they finished on was played Spinal Tap. They ran Spinal Tap, First time we ever saw it. And I remember just being in, even then as a kid, as a young man, who didn't really know much about music, especially about touring a lot. I was just howling with I just thought it was the greatest thing I'd ever seen, And still to this day, I challenge anyone who doesn't like that film not to see something new every time they watch it.
Yeah.
It gets fresh every time, It's
Yeah. I mean, even right down to the stateside moments when you've got oh, come on. You got Paul Schaefer going, "No, kick this ass. Kick this ass. Right now. I want you to kick this ass."
Yeah. Arnie Fufkin, kick this ass. Yeah. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. I tell you what happened. It's so good.
Well, we should take a moment to say hello to everybody who's chatting in. I really appreciate everybody being out there. Make sure you guys subscribe. I could go on all frigging day about how blessed I am to be talking to this gentleman here. And here's actually a question before we get started from Born Distracted. How long did it take you to get signed to your first record label?
Okay. Well, that's an interesting question because it didn't take very long, but we've preambled that whole thing with lots and lots and lots of gigs. We started off, like I said, in a tiny little seaside town in the UK, Scarborough, a little tiny place. We built up a local following over quite a short space of time because we were very blessed to have a guy called Paul Todd, who was a local promoter and a local theatre impresario. Actually, he used to work for doesn't anymore. He's still a very good friend of mine, but he used to work for Alan Ayckbourn, and Alan Ayckbourn's a very, very, you probably know of Alan Ayckbourn, a fantastic playwright. And he had his theatre randomly was in Scarborough. His main theatre where he debuted all of his shows was in Scarborough before it went to the West End of London and across the world. He's the second most successful playwright next to Shakespeare. That is a fact.
Wow.
So Paul Todd was his musical director. And Paul used to run these little shows at a place called the Square Cat, which was a cafe bar in the theatre. And so we went from playing at sixth form college in our local refectory to kids, to playing Sunday nights at the Stephen Joseph Theatre. And we quickly, because Paul Todd was a very well-known guy, we quickly got noticed by local press, and we got noticed by local business people. We got a record. We ended up getting a small record deal when our manager, who lasted pretty much the rest of the time with us through the band's career, called Kevin Nixon, he came to see us play at that venue. It held 100 people, Stuart, 100 people. So we played these gigs. We got our manager Kevin got on board. He managed to get us. He had a little record label, so he gave us an independent record label deal. And we put out our first album, which was basically a conglomeration of music that we'd recorded through mums and dads giving us money to go to a studio, that sort of thing. And Kevin helped us to sort of have our first experiences in a major studio. So we went and worked with a guy called, now what was he called? Roy Neve. And Roy Neve randomly has got a very big name in the rock business because he was the first guy to ever record Def Leppard. Now, Def Leppard went to a studio in Hull, the same studio we went to, which was called Fairview Studios, and they did their Bludgeon Riffiola EP with Roy Neve. Now, I'm big friends with Joe Elliott, and me and Joe have talked about Roy many times, and we both remember the same thing, that he preferred to get paid. Yeah, right. So he preferred to get paid in marijuana than money. So that was what he did. So not that we paid him in that, because we were little kids and we didn't know what marijuana was, frankly, at the time.
Come on.
Well, no. We really didn't. No, we were completely middle-class boys. We didn't have a clue. But
yeah,
anyway,
no, I wouldn't have been able to do that either.
Mate, honestly, it was we led sheltered lives to start with. But anyway, so we did this whole thing. So we recorded a really, really good set of recordings with Kevin's help, and we went and put this record out, which was called Too Posh to Mosh.
Yeah.
That went out into the ether, went out into the whole of the world. And it's not like it is today. It was really difficult to sell records, really tough to get record labels to get interest in you. So we put this record out, and it immediately got some interest because Kerrang started talking about it. We got reviews in Music Week and all this sort of thing. And we were then at the same time opening for Guns N' Roses and opening for Tesla and opening for Faith No More and Vow Wow and all these cool people at the coolest venue in the whole of the world, as far as we were concerned, the Marquee Club in Wardour Street. So we very quickly got a lot of A&R executives coming down and scouts coming down and watching us play. But the single most important thing, and I just see Diane Perlmutter just mentioned this, which is really important.
Yes.
The most important thing that happened to us is that whilst Channel 4, the Channel 4 I was talking about earlier on, was launching, they were continuing their music programming. And one of the things that they did is they did a thing called Famous for 15 Minutes, which was a program where they chose, I think it was 6 bands from all over the UK to be premiered on this program, which went out prime time on the coolest channel in British television at the time. And they debuted 2 bands on each of these shows. So they say there was 3, maybe there was 8 bands. So there was maybe 4 programs or whatever. And we got chosen to be in one of these programs. And so we filmed it at the Stephen Joseph Theatre. So we had Marquee Club performances. We had our little album out and being reviewed, and we did Famous for 15 Minutes. And those 3 things were the perfect storm for the record industry to take notice of the band. And that was around, I would say that probably took from 1980, probably 87. It took about 18 months to get a record in, and we were making our debut album at the the beginning of 1989.
Well, when I think about this, I'm very blessed as far as a fan of yours for all these years through Little Angels and stuff and your solo stuff, and which I wasn't aware of during the time. I've only become aware of that now that we've gotten back together.
Hey, I forgot about it. I wrote it.
Yeah. So you've known all about it all the time.
Absolutely.
But, I was very blessed to have met up with Jeff Ifland from Polydor at the time, who had just left. He had left Geffen Records to work for Polydor. Right. So, see, that's what I'm talking about with those things where I'm like, who leaves Geffen Records? But Polydor made him this big promise that things were going to be moving ahead. And And so that's how I got to knowing you guys. Because at the time that was the same label that had Yngwie Malmsteen.
Yep.
And that's how I got to know you guys on Don't Pray for Me. That's a whole other story, but yeah, so that's great. I'm glad to hear that story because that puts me in line with when you first started.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, I feel very, very blessed. I mean, I think this question's it's a really important one, but you know, because record labels have always been very difficult. You know, it's always very, very hard to get a record deal. I mean, it's incredibly hard to get a record deal these days. With the majors. I'm not talking about independents because there's a lot of independents out there, and the independent scene's where it's at really now. You know, in lots of ways, in terms of the crucial creative pulse of the industry.
Right.
Because the majors are so huge now that you have to be, you know, Beyonce or Ed Sheeran to get it even to reach those heights to kind of become that thing, and they're few and far between. They are signing things, but they take a lot less chances. And so, you know, we got signed to an 8-album record deal through which was a Polygram label, now Universal, of course. And they guaranteed that we would make 3 records. Guaranteed we would make 3 records. You would not get that deal today. It would not happen. So they were investing lots of money in a band. You know, they were looking at a band like Little Angels, and they were thinking to themselves, well, we've got to stick at this for 3 albums. That's 5 years worth of work. And that's indeed what happened. We made 3 studio records with that label. We worked really hard with them. They worked. I mean, I will never have anything bad said about Polydor. They worked their backsides off for Little Angels. They worked really, really hard, and we achieved a #1 record and 10 top 40 hit records in the UK and hits all over the world. So we did very, very well. But it's worth noting, I think, that there's no less amount of energy put into getting that record deal than anybody else being in a band. We were in the right place, right time. Some would call it luck, but as I don't believe in it, I think we made our own luck, if you know what I mean. Because we were happening. We just happened to hit a bit of the moment, you know.
Yeah, because I never want to look at an artist and go, "Oh, you got lucky." I worked my ass off.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, for every gig, and here's my other point about it. If you, all right, let's just say at that time, Little Angels and because that's the other band. Let's just say you show up at the same gig, right? And it's how do you know, how well do you do against somebody else? And there's important people there who are going to sign a band. They want to sign a band. So let's just say you both get up there and you're equally good. All right. You're just outstanding. You're aces all night long. But one of the members of the band is a real ass to whoever or doesn't conduct themselves correctly towards those people who are going to make those decisions. And yet the person from the other band does. Is that luck that the other band gets it? No. I mean, if you're going to conduct yourself in a way that's enough business with rock and roll, then you're going to get that. And that's not because you're lucky. It's because you've decided not to be an ass.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think there's a lot of that rings true. I think, you know, we were, you know, like I said earlier on, joking aside, we weren't dragged up as people. You know, we weren't in the gutters. Right. We weren't these kind of mucky ass rock and rollers that kind of frequented the streets and all the rest of it. We were. My mum and dad. My dad was a teacher. My mum was a housewife. It was the same with Bruce and Jim's mum and dad. They were both teachers. You know, you know, we were kind of. I guess I don't know how you'd regard it in America, but I guess we were kind of like it was kind of working class, but it was the lower middle classes. So we were kind of. My dad was a professional, you know, there was all that sort of thing. So we grew up in very kind households. My mum and dad gave me a lot of love. I was introduced to music in a fantastic way. You know, I was never beaten, you know, or I played
in your
out,
lyrics.
Right. I played out on my bike, you know, I hung around with my friends. I had a fantastic childhood. I would not for one second try and make that up. That was true. Right. It was a brilliant thing. So that stuff preceded us. You know, whenever we went into venues, we were always polite, you know. I mean,
right.
And a lot of the problem with it, a lot of the time, is it kind of came unstuck a little bit for us when we first started getting involved with magazines like Kerrang and Raw magazine, because they didn't like the idea of the fact that we were these clean-cut kids. They wanted us to be the kids that were smashing hotel rooms up and stuff like that,
Yep.
because we were getting some traction, and it didn't meet their expectations of what rock and roll should be about,
Right.
So we started having the Mickey taken out of us quite a lot, that we were the. I remember there was this whole thing about us drinking apple ties, because it was apple juice. Because I was teetotal for years. I didn't even start drinking until I was in my 20s. It was ridiculous. And so I kind of found this sort of world. We entered this world, Stuart, of this kind of strange expectation that was all, for as far as I'm concerned, was about all the wrong stuff. I still don't understand. I still don't understand what machismo and what violence and what that kind of thing has got anything to do with music. I don't understand where that comes from, because I never got Manowar, never understood what standing around in a codpiece, sort of having been muscle bound and talking about death to false metal. What that has got anything to do with rock and roll makes no sense to me whatsoever. Rock and roll is about freedom. Rock and roll at its best is about freedom and the narrative of the people and humanity, right? And I never really understand why sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Well, maybe the sex bit a little bit, but maybe not the drugs and rock and roll particularly, will ever have anything to do with making great music. I really don't, and I've yet to be convinced why that means anything.
Yeah, I get you. I know. If I could probably try to figure it out for the States at least, as to why Manowar and some of these bands get big, it's because people are just trying to figure out a way to stay strong as something gets in them. And you're like, yeah, you're going to be this guy, and you're like, I don't know. Does that help you at all? I don't know. Just be a man and be a stand-up person. And that's going to make you more of a man than a man who walks around telling women what to do and telling people what to do and wearing a codpiece. Don't get me wrong. There's some of that music. I have fun listening to it just because it's head on, it's loud. It takes that place in you when you just want to live in a movie for a minute and you're like,
yeah, I get all that, but you know what? If I think what I'm getting at really more than anything else is, and I'm not decrying anyone, because I think anyone who picks up an instrument and spends time learning and gets on a stage, fantastic, because I know how tough that is. But I think where it crosses the divide from being fantasy into somehow becoming some sort of weird reality, that it starts to become odd to me. Because one of my favorite artists of all time, as you well know, is Ronnie James Dio. I'm an absolute worship. I worship the ground the man walks on. He was an absolute giant of the business, and he was an incredible. And I don't mean that to sound silly, because he wasn't a very tall man. But what I mean is, he's
that odd.
His voice. I'd sort of better caveat that, but his voice and his songwriting power are second to none as far as I'm concerned. An absolute. He's one of my biggest heroes. I met him once, and it was one of the greatest moments of my life. But Ronnie's approach to things like Holy Diver and the sort of the swords and the sorcery style of things was it was a fantasy. It was an elemental fantasy, and he used it as metaphor. Ronnie was very much a kind of man of the people. Actually, if you read a lot of his lyrics, it was very, or I would regard as almost like working class. He was talking to the little man. He was supporting the underdog, but he clothed it in a wonderful sense of fantasy, because I do understand that, and I agree with you. I think Iron Maiden have built a career off people being able to escape into a world of wonder, But then I don't find that there's anything violent about Iron Maiden. Not really. Oh, okay, you could look at the album and say, oh, Eddie. But what I mean is that it's not overt violence. It's fantasy. It's stories. It is stories. It's a construct.
Yeah,
it's
like Steve would build things off of books that he read, much like Neil Peart. Would write from stories, and out of Omni magazine, he came up with Red Barchetta, and
exactly.
and things like this, and it's brilliant, all the things that he came. Dune, I mean, all the things you can Run Silent, Run Deep. I mean, you can just go through everything and just go. There's that one, To Tame a Land, all that stuff.
And so that all that's brilliant, because I'm a big, I'm a big prog rock fan. One of the very first bands I ever really got into was Uriah Heep. There's nothing more fantasy element than that. But what it is, it's stories. It's like telling a great film. I've got no problem with that. The problem that I always foresee it with is just this kind of strange machismo world. I think to myself, hang on, dude, you're playing a guitar, you're singing a song. You know what I mean? This is communication. This isn't, and I've always found that world, and especially the world of drugs and rock and roll, to be very hard to deal with, because I've never been a drug taker. I've never been interested in that, and it kind of, my imagination has always been so huge anyway. I don't need something to take me out of my world and give me another reason to believe in something. I'm not. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And I will say, that's just my world. I'm not saying that's not the same for everybody, but I've had a problem with that world. And so when we were in that world and we entered into that world, and all of a sudden there was this kind of like dark underbelly of the business. And I've got to say, a lot of the time I saw the drug taking and I saw people indulging in that sort of thing was often not musicians, weirdly. It was often people in the back room of the record industry, at the conventions and things like that, and at the parties, you know, where all that stuff came out. They're more rock and roll than I'll ever be, if that's what rock and roll is. It just wasn't my world, you know. I found it quite difficult to deal with, I've got to be honest.
Well, I think that was what was interesting about Kiss too. You know, they dealt with a lot of that, where, you know, Casablanca was just drenched in drugs. The people at the highest ends of it were doing drugs. And, you know, that's the one thing Gene, and I know as far as Gene and Paul are concerned, have always said, you know, we did not feel that we needed to get into that. Because like you, I can assume, just in this way, that you got more of a high off of your creating and you're making your show better, which, you know, that was something else I was going to mention earlier too, about when we were talking about bands and building your band, is that I've had people also complain in the fact that they're like, well, what about that when they book a band who's better than you, or, you know, real popular, and then you don't have anybody coming to your show? That sucks. I'm like, well, maybe instead of complaining about it, maybe just go and have a band meeting and go, how can we make our show as good as that? Are you interested in making it that way? And if everybody in the band's like, no, I just want to kind of do it this way. Okay, cool. Well, then we'll have audiences stolen by other bands. If you're cool with that, that's fine. But if we want to not have that issue again, let's make our band better.
Yeah, I think you know, I would broadly agree with that. But I think the way I look at it is this: there's a couple of things for me. I don't feel in competition with anybody. I think I don't feel that there is competition in music. I think we all do something different. I think,
and I do feel that too. Yes,
I love to see a great band play. I love to be blown away by their music. But what I do is what I do,
right?
And what they do is what they do.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to be the same as them, and I hope they don't want to be the same as me. It's like one of the biggest problems I have when I'm producing records and I'm producing young bands is that one of the very first things I ever do after we've had our initial meetings and we're in the studio and we're talking about what actually probably before we even hit the studio, we're having our meetings and we're deciding whether we want to work with each other. I'll often say to bands, and it's a bit of a loaded question, but I will say, so what is this? Why are you here? What's it all about? And I get one of two answers. I get the right answer, which is, well, we just want to be us. You know, we've got this vibe and we feel that we play great together, and we don't quite know what it is yet. We're trying to discover it, but we feel really strongly that this is us. That's the right answer. The wrong answer is blank faces. Oh, don't really know, but we really, really like Alter Bridge.
Oh.
So my answer is there already is an Alter Bridge. We don't need another one. We really don't want another one. And they'll go, yeah, but what we mean is we really like the sounds of the guitars and the riffs. I'm like, yeah, but what you're really saying is you're going to use their riffs and their ideas, and we don't want that. We want the best of you. We want your thing. And I think the problem is that, and this has been always in music. And I did it. You know, we all do it. We've all done it. We're all standing on the shoulders of giants. We're all reusing other people's ideas. We're reinterpreting. But that's the key. Reinterpreting old ideas is fine, and bringing them into your own world and having your own vision. Thieving off other people and expecting to get away with it isn't fine, as far as I'm concerned. And I think the thing that you're describing is often based in those kinds of worlds where the fear is, I think, sometimes is about being found out. It's about wondering whether they're going to get away with it. And I think I would say that the joy of music isn't in trying to be as good as the next man or trying to be good as anybody else. It's about just being good to yourself and having the joy of performing and enjoying playing with other people, not the high expectations of whether doing that thing is going to get you any level of success, because you know what? I can tell you categorically, success does not arrive from pursuing those things. Success is a result of being focused, having a vision, standing by that vision, being joyful, enjoying the response, developing, and allowing your world to be what it is, and not being infiltrated by others. Because that's all you've got. You have nothing else. And the moment you try and break those walls down and it becomes a challenge to be better than someone else, you've already lost.
Right. Well, I think, Toby, I think we can honestly say that I think we've come up with something different than just another Hammer Away show. We've actually got a piece here that would be a wonderful motivator for lots of bands. I could take that little chunk of what you just said right there and just put it out there with a track behind it and make a new motivational video. Because I think that's brilliant. I think a lot of people
All that call me an idiot. So I don't know. One of the two, mate. One of the two.
That was such a great show until it turned to whale shit. And then yeah.
Hey, I thought that was the high point. Or the low point.
Or hey somewhere in between, as my student does. How you doing today? Almost on the reg. He's like, eh. So I will say this. I just want to do just a brief history with you here real quick of last year. We started working on their new album at the time, and The Truth Ain't What It Used to Be. And such a brilliant record. This will all be covered in the history thing that I can play tomorrow. So you guys will get a nice history of Little Angels through that interview that we've already done. But a little thing that wasn't in that interview was that interview ended and I was getting ready to go over to Europe and be on tour for 4 shows in a row, not only with Wayward Sons, but with Steel Panther. But Steel Panther isn't my other point. Really, my other point is the family of Wayward Sons fans. Amazing. Diane Perlmutter right there, my girl right there. I mean, come on. She put me up for the night and we had such a great time. And so I flew over. We did the show in Utrecht in the Netherlands. We had a show in Belgium. And then I flew on over. That was an interesting night, spending the night at the airport when I wasn't supposed to. That's a story in itself. I'll relate that to y'all later. But then flying from Belgium to London, taking a train over to Bristol, having the show there. That's when I was and thank you, Lord, for Jeff Gibson, because he does a lot of work with you guys, and he sure took care of my ass that night, because he drove me to my hotel and helped me get my stuff in. I was completely knackered. I had no idea. That's when I was like, did I have COVID at that point? That's when I was thinking about it, because I had to get in the tub. I didn't even know if I could make that last London show because I felt so crappy. But it was all good. It was all good. And then to end the tour with you guys doing the Brixton show, and then you guys had camera guys there that night, and I even ended up in a couple of the videos. That was really cool with Diane and my friend Penny that I met in the front row at that show. And she loves you guys. She was like, I love Wayward Sons. I go, they're opening tonight, Penny. She's like, that's so cool. So she was really excited. Right. And then we end up on the video. Now, there was a great moment too. There's 2 things I have to say here before I turn it back over to our questioning. 2 things. Here I am hanging out with Steel Panther and Wayward Sons. I fly all the way over from the States. And what do we do on the first night after the show? I have my friend with me who's from the Netherlands. I'm in the States. I go to Europe. We go to a TGI Fridays and do what, Tobe? What do we do?
I don't know. Have hamburgers or something, probably. I don't know.
Watch
Or
the Super Bowl.
oh, the Super. Of course we did. Yes. Yeah.
And you guys had never seen an American football game.
No. I remember. We went there, didn't we? Because they had the private tables and all that, and we sat up there. Oh, my goodness me.
That's it. And, you know, one of my favorite moments of that night was sitting with you, and we were sitting there talking with the guys from Steel Panther, and we got in a conversation about Bryan Adams and the Reckless album. And that was a great moment. But I'll fast forward then. When we finished up at the Brixton show, you guys, it was a real honor to hop in the van with you guys, because you guys had somebody that wasn't in the van that night. And you guys gave me a ride because I was staying at the same hotel where you were. Now, earlier on in that trip, I had made cookies, right? Made cookies.
Lots of them.
Yes, lots of cookies. Yes, lots of biscuits. And so I brought them to one of the shows there in the Netherlands, but then I brought them again to one of the shows there, to the show there at Brixton. And I made them at Diane's place. Well, while me and her daughter Katie are shopping for that stuff, I find a Deadpool clown character that was a Funko Pop character.
Oh, yeah.
And I saw those and I go, and she goes, I said, we ought to get this for the guys. And she goes, yeah, we should get 2 of them. So we got 2 of them, and I handed it to Dave, right? I gave Dave one because the girls were discussing. I go, who do we give them to? Do we just give them to the guys? She goes, oh, no, you should give one to Dave, and he could put it on his keyboard, and you got to give one to Phil. This is what I'm talking about, people. In my description, this is my most embarrassing moment of that tour. I hand one to Dave. Dave's just Dave. You know, he's
Dave's the sweetest
Dave Kemp
in the world.
I know you'll totally disagree with me on this, but Dave Kemp is one of the cuddliest people you will ever meet.
Oh, he is. Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I know you would agree with me. He is awesome, and all the guys in the band in Wayward Sons are great. But I handed that to Phil, and Phil looked at me like, what the hell is this? And I felt horrible. I'm like, he doesn't get it. He doesn't know. I'm imposing on his world right now. And going, please accept this. And he's like, what the hell is this? And I remember you going, Deadpool, it's a character, it's a movie, it's comic book. Still didn't get it.
I think it's fair to say that it's completely not Phil's world. Put it that way.
No, I was so embarrassed. I'm like, yeah, okay, never mind. Just sign it and give it to somebody. I'm sure they would love it.
I wouldn't worry about that. I think the great thing about bands, you know what's cool about bands and why I love this band is that it's full of characters. You know, it'd be a bit boring if we were all exactly the same. You know, that's the way I look at it.
And I think one of my other favorite times was Diane's birthday, actually, during that time. And everybody in the band did a shout out for me and then I posted them out there. So what a great birthday present. All right. So let's move on. Just really quick. What was after we got done with that, everything shut down. So I came back home, and then it was almost a year ago because it was St. Patty. It was today, a year ago today.
Very much. Yeah.
We left school, and we hadn't been in school for a long while. That was our spring break started, and then we were into summer and didn't have anything else. So how did you kind of sort your life post tour and moving into your many projects? Because as I said before, you really turned on the gas.
Yeah, well, it was necessity. I mean, I think, you know, anyone who's listening to this who's a musician will know exactly what I mean. Is that, you know, if you choose to become a musician professionally, you have to roll with the punches. You know, it's feast and famine. You know, and never the twain shall meet. If you know what I mean. So I'm used to having to find ways out of the maze, in one way or another. And so, even though COVID presented a very particular and still continues to present a very particular challenge, I went into my studio. I mean, everything got, like you say, everything closed down. Me and Dave Kemp were working on this kids film project, which had literally just signed the contracts to produce the music for this film, and the contracts were pulled in 24 hours. We'd signed them about the 2 days before, and I woke up the following morning after the COVID restrictions. The whole thing was clearly starting to go completely awry, and my inbox was full of emails from people. We can't do this. You've got to cancel this show. The contract's pulled from the film. We can't do this. We can't that. So my whole world, just like most of the people's worlds, kind of collapsed around my ears. I also wasn't very well. I think I genuinely might have had COVID. I think we've talked about this before. I spent the entire Steel Panther tour feeling the most unwell I've ever felt in my life, and it was all chest. It was all dry coughing, and I had to go through that entire tour with hardly any voice in my head most of the time, trying to get through it. If you remember,
because you even had a moment in 2019 in the end of the year, right?
I did, yeah. I mean, it was a kind of weird one. Because I think we're starting to realize that COVID was probably in the system a lot earlier than they thought, because of course they're not recognizing it. I picked up some kind of bug on the Black Star Riders tour in the UK and had to cancel a few shows, and it was the worst I've ever felt. I swear to God. But when we got back from the Steel Panther tour, we were heading towards Christmas, obviously, because it was the end of the Black Star Riders tour. I was very, very poorly, and I just had this moment where it was just Christmas Eve. I felt like I'd been run over by a truck. I couldn't breathe. It was all the hot, all the things that they described, lost my sense of taste and smell, everything. Felt absolutely dreadful. Went to the doctors, and they just went, "You've got flu. Take these antibiotics because you've got a chest infection," all the rest of it.
Right. That's what they told my brother.
Didn't feel any better. Nothing happened. Anyway, I kind of get over it. I started still felt very, very rough, and all the rest of it. And I go on tour with Steel Panther, and I have a terrible. I mean, the tour was brilliant. So I've got not, but it was a struggle for me because I had problems with my throat, problems with my chest. So, of course, I come off the back of that on that tour, and we're into this whole lockdown thing, and I was feeling pretty low anyway. And of course, all these things kick off. So I went into my little studio, and I sat down in this very chair I'm sat in now, and I looked across in the corner of my room, and there's my guitar, right? I'll show you it. Let me just show you it. There it is. There's my guitar.
Yeah.
Where is it? I can't even see it. The bloody thing.
Yep.
So there's my guitar sat there, right? So I've got my guitar. It always sits on that stand. It's the one that I use all the time. And I just thought to myself, you know what? I've been here before. There's what have I got in my life? I've got the voice in my head. I've got the songs that I've written. I've got that piece of wood with those bits of metal on it over there. I'm going to use that. What am I going to do with that? How am I going to utilize that? And so I immediately thought, internet. Right. Okay. People are going to be worried about this whole thing. Right. They're going to have no entertainment. All they're going to have is how many Netflix films can you watch, for crying out loud? That sort of thing. So I talked to my manager, and I talked to Rob, Rob Town, who helps me with all my stuff. Yeah. And we just kind of came up with a plan. We said, look, why don't you play online for free? We'll go through all of the Little Angels records, and that's what we did for 12, 13 weeks through that entire period. Every single Thursday at 8:15, I played for an hour. I played acoustic songs. I messed up. I forgot the words. We told stories. People send questions in, and it built and built and built and built and built and built. And it's become a real thing. And I've built a small business off the back of it. I'm now an online artist. I sell my merchandise, what we call D2C, direct to customer. I've been re-releasing albums. I've been re-releasing materials that I've had over the years, remastering them all, recurating them. I've released an album of acoustic performances from the lockdown shows that I've been doing. And I've now built a small business. I've got a Patreon site, which is patreon.com/Toby and the Whole Truth, for anyone who's interested in that. Essentially, you get, and I love Patreon. I think Patreon is an amazing idea. People get to support me as an artist, and we do live shows on a Monday night. I've got an archive that's deeper than it's ever been before of all things Little Angels, all things my solo material, and I engage with the audience, and I just think it's absolutely brilliant. It is the side of the modern world that I really, really am embracing and I'm enjoying,
right?
And it's getting bigger and bigger and more exciting. And I launched something this week on my Patreon site, which is essentially called the New Song Workshop, which is me. Get this. I've never done this in my life, but this is the modern world, and I really like it.
Yeah.
I am working on a new solo record. Even though I've just finished the Wayward Sons album, I'm starting to work on material for a solo, what will be a Toby Jepson solo record, the second Toby and the Whole Truth album. And I played 4 songs to the patrons last night in their rawest form. So it's not even like I finished the words. It's not like all the chord progressions right. I haven't got any arrangements. I just busked the ideas to them. And to tell you what, Stu, it was liberating. It was fantastic because I was getting like first-hand immediate reactions back from the fans, the people that I'm making this music for, of them saying, "Oh wow, we really like that one. Wasn't so keen about that one, but I really love that bit in it," that sort of thing. So I'm getting
that's great.
Oh man, it's brilliant. And so yeah, to top and tail it all off, I feel very fortunate. I think through necessity and through growth as a musician from my life since I was 18 years old, having to roll with the punches like I described earlier on, I've been able to grasp the nettle a little bit and use the situation into as good a possibility as I possibly can. And I think the thing I've loved about it is that it's a supportive role. I feel that on a Thursday night, we as a community can all get together because I have 400 or 500 people watching me most sort of weeks. You know, sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more.
Yeah.
But, I think people get a lot out of it. I think it's a chance for people just to take a bit of a breath and not have to worry too much, you know?
Absolutely. Now you can see some footage here. There's your wife.
My wife.
She helps you out. She's awesome.
I know I'm batting above my grade. I know I am.
I'm laughing because I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah, it's great fun. I mean, that's my kitchen. I mean, what you're looking at there, folks, is my kitchen, and we put the banner up with them. I mean, the new season of this whole thing we've just been doing. I think we're into show 8 or 9 at the moment. Yeah. The banner at the back there that you can see that says Digital Busker, which is in the Indiana Jones style. That goes at the top of my cabinets, and we staple that to the top of it. And you know, I bring things out of my studio, the mementos, and all these posters are all the ones that I use every week. And whatever the theme is each week, like last week we did a celebration of of Young Gods. Sorry, the Little Angels album, The Young Gods, because it's 30 years old this year. Can you believe that, Stu?
Wow, 30 years old.
Forget it, man. You know. So and so that was that week, and this week that's coming up, we're doing one called Tobe's Titanic Tunes, which is my favourite of my own songs through my career. And so we theme it every week. It's great fun, and you know, I don't charge anything for it. It's totally free. And then if people want to buy a T-shirt later on down the line, then that's kind of my reward for it, sort of thing. And it's
speaking of shirts, can we still get the original Wayward Son shirt?
You will be able to. I mean, we do, because we're a small business. What we do is we do a pre-order on people buying them up front, but and then we ship them out. You know, and we are shipping all over the world. I mean, we've got quite a few fans. I think largely thanks to you in the US. So we send stuff out to the US. We send stuff out to Germany, all over Europe. You know, but we are now planning on having the shop opened up. So we've got all of the shirts that we've had available over the last sort of 18 months or so, the last year or so rather, available to buy as singular items. But that takes a little bit more planning, to be fair, because it's
absolutely. I'm just looking up, you know, now that I learned that I can do this, because I'm really cool now. Yeah, whatever. You know, I'm trying to find kicking. That's what I want. I just want to show this too, because this is where one of the places visually, I just want to show this. This is where I got my start. And I actually had, because back in the day, they had the videos that they would put out. And part of the promotion would be to send out VHS tapes with the videos on them.
Ah, right, yeah, I remember.
And so this is one of my first ones.
That was so cold shooting. Well, it was really hot in the day, but of course it's in the desert. And we were near the Joshua Tree plantation, you know, up around there. Yeah. And it was red hot in the daytime, of course, because it's in the desert. But in the night, when we did all the night shooting, I've never felt it so cold in all my life.
Oh my God!
I mean, and we were literally wrapped in blankets, but it had been like 102 degrees in the daytime or something ridiculous. You know, it was like, how can you have this? This is a crazy country. How can it go from that to that? That's not even real. You know, it's like it was unbelievable. Great experience.
I have two things to say. What if you guys would have written up the plans for the Little Angels letters and it said 18 inches?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, but the triptychs are 15 feet tall, but it says 18 inches here. Yeah, totally.
That's it. You're a shoe-in for Angelica Houston any day.
Oh, mate, honestly, fantastic. Oh no, man, this was our first experience of making a video in America, and it was brilliant because we had this it was a fantastic opportunity because the crews, you'll know this probably, but in California, especially in Hollywood, because we were signed in the UK, but we were prioritizing America across the whole of Polygram. So that meant that we got to make videos in America. So we went over to California, went to Los Angeles the first time as a band, and I went over the week before and met, because I was kind of one of the ones that was into the visuals and stuff, and I was really into filmmaking. So I went and met with the director and the producers and all that. But they were all Hollywood people. They were all people that had made big movies. So I remember the DOP had just come off of making something like True Lies, or not True Lies, but like one of the Schwarzenegger movies or something. And
right.
The Grip House were people that worked on all the big movies. And the director, I forget the guy's name now, but he made this really amazing film called The Kindred, which is a brilliant B-movie, horror movie. Yeah. And he was the guy that directed that movie, and he was directing our video, you know. And like the guy that was the producer was like, would work with Steven Spielberg and all this. And we were like, of course, I know all these names, but this was just their job. This was just what they did on a daily basis. They filled in time between making movies by making music videos, you know. So we went up there with like, you know, a Winnebago and a camera truck and a lighting truck and all these props that these guys had made. Oh, we had such a great time. It was just incredible. It was one of my favorite memories of us as making that video.
Well, what were those letters made out of?
They were made out of they were just flats. They were made out of hardboard. What we would call hardboard, just basically pinned onto 2x1 timbers sort of thing. So, but they had it all made at this kind of prop house, and they'd made all these like all those lighting. That was all fluorescent lighting tubes. And this guy LD had come and created this whole rig so it could work in the desert, and it was amazing, man. Honestly, they really put the effort in, you know. And oh, don't I look young there? Goodness me. Well, I was.
Well, right. And if you guys listen to the song, check out Little Angels. The three albums that we're mainly talking about is Don't Pray for Me. And let me do this real quick. Don't Pray for Me, Young Gods, and Jam. Those are the three records. I finally have them all. I finally got Jam. I don't know, probably a year and a half ago now. But I had the first two records straight away. I remember my friend Jeff was still working for Polydor when that second record came out, and I was flipping out because that was something like when Dream Theater came out, and they had When Dream and Day Unite with Charlie, and you know, then it was 3 years until they put out the next one. So you're like, this is crazy. But so it was great to get these records, but I'm like, why doesn't anybody know about this?
Well, and you know. We hit a bit of a weird time, really. I think, you know, we were in that last vanguard of bands getting signed to major labels in the UK, and there was the mood was changing. You know, when we were releasing Young Gods, Nirvana had already released, you know, Nevermind, and you could see winds of change happening on Pearl Jam. I mean, I remember seeing. I often say this to my wife, you know, to Kat, that I moved to Bristol. Just before we started making the Jam album, between the Young Gods album, the Jam album, and I started going to a very, very famous club in Bristol called the Beer Keller, who was run by a friend of mine called Andy Fox, and he's still a good friend of mine. He was the promoter, and Andy was one of those really smart guys. They used to book the right bands, and I can remember being in that club watching Pearl Jam headline with Soundgarden as their opening band.
Wow.
And there was hardly any. Well, it wasn't empty, but there was maybe it held about 800 people at the Beer Keller, and they maybe had 500 people there. And it was before Alive had just come out, so Alive was just starting to happen, but nobody knew who Soundgarden was. But I can remember being stood in front of the stage thinking, that is one of the greatest rock and roll voices I've ever heard in my life. You know, it was just staggering to see that band in that stage, on that stage at that point. And but you could tell that the winds of change were coming and things were changing. People were getting sick to death of, you know, people that had hair like mine.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, well, yeah, there's a whole other thing there. But I also think in the 90s, people were starting to get sick of people who could sing.
Well, yeah, I guess. I mean, I think there's a bit of that. I think, you know, but it's like any other movement, isn't it? It's like any movement that happens in art is that you have to sweep away the old guard to see what the new guard looks like. And it's very easy to understand why people grasp onto these things. I mean, we've had 2 or 3 big movements in the UK in sort of the last sort of 20, 30 years. The biggest one really in the UK, from the UK's point of view, was the explosion of what they call the Manchester sound. All of those bands that came out of that, you know, and so the biggest one being Oasis, of course. So there's I think we're all looking for for a new train to ride, and I think it's quite easy to make that. I think that period of music was quite interesting because it didn't really change that much for me. That's what was really weird about it. Is actually Pearl Jam really are just a classic rock band, as Soundgarden were. You know, they were just a really great, just a slightly different take on it. You know, but they're just a guitar band. You know, but it's of course how you clothe it, isn't it? And Nirvana.
Well, I know.
Nirvana threw everything out the window, really, didn't they?
That's for sure. I'm trying to find one of these. You know, my brain goes away from me sometimes when I'm trying to pull, figure out what was the live video you guys put out? Why am I blanking on that?
What we did Live Jam, and the Big Bad video. Are you talking about?
Well, you know, I'm working on getting those. Those are going to be coming my way, so I'm working on.
You can get them from Nigel Crooks, because
that's exactly where my conversation was happening yesterday. I'm like, I need those. No, what was the you guys did when we did the footage? Well, I say I was part of it, but when you guys shot the footage there at the Brixton show, you used that for a couple of videos. What was the first one you used?
What, for the song?
Yeah.
Feel Good Hit of the Summer. I think we used some of the footage in there, and we used it for I think, was it Long Line of Pretenders? I can't remember.
Yes, that's it.
Long Line of Pretenders.
Yes, that's it. I just wanted to show people a little bit of you guys live in this video, and because you know we're getting into it. But and you do hold the record now for the longest lightning round, and I even cut it in half.
Sorry, mate.
No, don't you dare apologize.
I told you, you don't want to set me off, mate. You don't want to get that.
Don't you dare apologize. I do want to say, you told us what inspired you on the busker session, the digital busker sessions, and then how did you enjoy doing you also had extra videos that you did in black and white of other people's songs that you would put out too. What was one of your favorite tunes to learn?
Well, I mean, I do those because it's a thing really. I never ever learned covers as a kid. I was never good enough. I could never. I'm not really a very good musician. I can't play an instrument particularly well. I'm not really that bothered about it. I play an instrument to be able to write songs. That's what I do. But I challenged myself. One of those things. I thought to myself, you know what? If I'm going to be sat around at home, then I'm going to learn some stuff. And I thought, well, I'm going to learn some of my favorite songs and see how well I can adapt them to the acoustic guitar. So I did ELO, Mr. Blue Skies. I did. One of my favorite ones actually was "Somebody to Love" by Queen, which I now can play. Really, I love playing that, you know. But I've got a very eclectic taste, and so I was trying all sorts of things, like, you know, Tempole Tudor over the hills with the swords of 1,000 men. I tried Bryan Adams songs. I did.
You did
all sorts.
Did you do ELO?
Yeah, I did. I did.
Mr. Blue Sky, right?
Blue Skies. Yeah. Sun is shining in the sky.
I love that song.
Out inside. They're one of my favorite bands. I absolutely love ELO. There is not a better band out there.
I have a librarian, former librarian, shall I say. She just retired from our school. Can't stand ELO. I was like, I was trying to put my finger on that the whole time. I'm like, what is it you don't like about them?
I know. It's impossible to not like.
That's what I thought. I mean, I remember buying the gatefold and then,
mate.
watching movies like, well, wasn't it Xanadu?
Yeah, Xanadu. They wrote all that, didn't they? Yeah.
And they're going into Tower Records and they got the big Out of the Blue album cover on there.
Yeah, I mean, great band. Just brilliant writer.
So then also, speaking of Diane, she sent me a copy. I love it. And I loved what you wrote on the inside as well. And I'm going to be sharing some of that later. I won't go through all that right now. But there's the man. Oh!
Doing his thing.
Yeah, his Mos Eisley shirt. I love that shirt, by the way. So we talked about the Patreon stuff too, and that's awesome. And then just before we get into the Wayward Son stuff, because that's the big thing. Real quick, what about your, or should I save this for later, the Viewfinder album?
Yeah, well, I mean that's been part of the joy of this whole process. Really, is I've had an opportunity to revisit my work and look at it from a different perspective. I put out the Ignorance is Bliss album, which is the first solo record I ever made outside of Little Angels, and that was a very angry, very sort of very different record for me. It changed me completely making that album. So I thought, but of course, that situation when I was releasing that record back in whenever it was 25 years ago, 1997 or whatever, later than that slightly, I think, that it was badly mishandled by the record label. It was an independent record label. It got released really, really poorly. I'd put my heart and soul into it. I was still very good friends with Brian Adams, and Brian had given me the use of his studio in Vancouver to mix the record, for instance, and he showed great grace in that. And I went over there and we spent loads of time in his studio and did that. And I came back to basically like a total and utter mismanagement of the release. And it destroyed me. It took me apart because it was a very, very heartfelt record that it was talking about a very important part of my life. It was the end of the Little Angels and what I felt about that. And it changed me musically. And it came out to a sort of chorus of total silence. And so it was just a bit of an opportunity this time around to re-release it, even though I only pressed 500 copies. I did it in a book, and I did it a high quality explanation about the whole process behind it. And it's garnered a lot of new interest. And so we are going to do a vanilla version of that. We are going to put out a cheaper version of that record. We're just about to sort of put that into play now because I'm absolutely inundated with people interested in getting hold of that record now. So that's amazing. It means I've got a chance to go and explore that again,
Right.
And the Viewfinder album, same thing. The Viewfinder covers 2003 when I got back to making music. Right through to 2002, actually. Right, 2002, right through to about 2013, because I released a lot of records. I released a lot of EPs, and the only reason I did the EPs was to give me a chance to have something to sell at the gigs, for me to go and play some gigs. But there's varying degrees of quality because I was recording stuff on the cheap. Because I didn't have any money. I was doing stuff at home. I was trying to do acoustic stuff, and so. And when I looked at all that work, when I look at that, in my head, it feels a bit like a sort of like a disheveled, disorganized toy cupboard. And so I felt I needed to put it into some kind of, I wanted to get the plastic, sort of the big potato head, put him on a shelf. I wanted the nice 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle of the battleship that needed to go on a shelf on its own outside, away from the Action Man figures. I needed to organize these things into a kind of catalog where I could sort of go, it's no longer thrown all over the floor, and I'm not going to stand on the Lego anymore because that hurts my foot, especially when I've only got my socks on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to organize all these songs into a better toy cupboard and close the door on it. And I know that the toys are all nice in there now. And if I open up the cupboard, I can look at them. They're all going to they might have a bit of dust on them, but they're going to be all nicely organized. And I can think, and that's the way that my brain works. That's why I'm mental. But anyway, so I released this compilation as a way of basically drawing a line under the solo work that I did through that period, because to me, it was, joking aside, a way of reorganizing it in my head so I could move on from that period, because there's a lot of darkness associated with that period for me.
Okay.
Lack of success, felt like I was beating my head against a brick wall, blah, blah, blah.
Well, that's fantastic. I appreciate that. I appreciate you telling us about that, because that's something I didn't realize yet. Because that album had come out and I'm putting this show together and I really haven't had a chance to pay attention to it yet. And
and get a copy.
I'll send you a copy, sweet talker.
Oh, you should. Yeah, I'm gonna have to, and then I'm gonna have to get the other album, Ignorance is Bliss. I'll have to get that one too when you release the vanilla version.
Yeah, I'll send you a copy, mate. Don't worry about that. You can review it.
Yeah, because those are things that I really want to be a part of. And there's also, there's so much of that solo stuff that's very, very good. So Viewfinder, do get out there and check that out and pick it up. It's got some cool retro style logo art on it too that I love. That's straight out. And you know what I got on the way here now?
What's that?
The Mod Squad.
Have you?
I do. The complete series.
Oh, great.
Hello and welcome to another edition of What a Dork.
Yeah.
Spot the Looney. That's what it is. What does this say? George is saying, a mentor of mine asked me if I could choose one song that I could listen to every day for the rest of my life and never get bored and sick of it. I chose Mr. Blue Sky from ELO. It's now my ringtone.
Great choice there, George. Brilliant.
That is great. That is great.
Uplifting. Such an uplifting tune,
It really is. And, it's got new wheels now because of Guardians of the Galaxy too.
Right. That's right, yeah.
So,
absolutely.
I really can't wait to talk to you again on another show about movies and stuff.
We'll have to do a movies edition, won't we? We'll have to do a movie.
Oh, dude. Yeah, we'll just start at 8 a.m. We'll have breakfast and work through lunch.
I just looked at the time. I can't believe we've been on 2 hours and 4 minutes. I've been whittering on, listening to my bullshit. I'm really sorry, folks out there. I do apologise. I hope it hasn't bored you to death. I mean, I just always find that drinking yourself into a stupor usually sort of dulls the edge of my voice. Really, I think it's sort of. Probably.
And we found this out about ourselves the very first time we talked. We were.
It
was all good. Actually, one of my favorite things about the last interview I did with Toby is the silly setup I had in my dining room.
Oh, the blanket.
Toby says, "Are you in the back of a van?"
Like, where the hell are you? In an airing cupboard? I don't know.
My wife called it my fort.
Yeah,
you just made a fort, didn't you? I go, yeah, I made a fort.
Yeah.
Now, let's move on into Wayward Sons, which makes me want to do this, where I'm going to share a little bit of some footage of you guys from this last tour that I was. This is the Brixton show.
Okay.
And this is where they had done some of the footage, and I'm there in the front right there. That was us. Let me go back a second here. There's Phil.
There's Phil. There he is. Not with his.
Oh, there it is, right there. There I am. And this.
Hey!
So there's Diane right there. Let's get to it here. There's Diane. Oh, I did it again. I'm getting all jumpy. It's got that little bit of a delay. But what a brilliant song, man. This is a great song. There we go. Diane right in the front. That was my friend Penny. That's, if you're looking at it, she's to the right.
Okay.
And then I'm right there behind Diane. Diane.
It was so packed that night. It was heaving that night. Heaving.
Oh, dude. It was crazy cool. I just couldn't believe it. Being there, there's Sam, and just there's Phil. I'll talk more about Phil. There's the cuddly Dave Kemp. And there's Nick Wastall. But a great show. We've got to get you guys over here to the States because I just want everybody here to experience what an amazing show this is. But let's move into Even the Score. The first single, the title track, is out there on YouTube now, right?
Yeah.
And I loved sending you Papa Pete and his wife in the car jamming out to it.
Yeah, it was great.
That was great. Loved it. So tell me about, because I'll play the history deal tomorrow, and they'll hear more about what I'm going to allude to here for a second, called being song drunk. You got song drunk on your last record when you were writing for it. Did you have any moments like that this time?
Slightly different situation this time because when we went in to make the Truth album, the whole idea was we were going to make 2 albums back to back. Okay. And so I'd written, genuinely, I know that I settled on 56 songs. And we went into the studio and we ended up working on, I think it was 25 or 26. And even at the very end of that process, because I do things in a very particular way. I like things to be as natural as possible. I don't want it to be forced. I like the feeling of camaraderie, and I like the search, and I like the mental agility of putting songs together and arrangements and the band all working together. And I know when I hit my moments where they are, and it takes quite a while to get those moments to hit, So for me, it's a lot of exploration. Although I am the songwriter, I write all the songs for the band, and I take them in their Rory's form, and then we as a band put them together. That's the way we work. On the Truth album, we went in with all those songs, and we worked our way through them one by one. And when I use that phrase "song drunk," it really did feel like I literally, right at the very end of the process, I was still writing songs. I came up with a couple of new songs. It was ridiculous, right? So we went in and this particular song, and you're going to get a bit of an exclusive here. There was a song that one of the very last songs we worked on was a song called "Faith in Fools,"
okay,
which was one of the last things I wrote. It as often happens with me, it just popped into my head one day. I couldn't write it down quick enough. I didn't know where it came from. I just put it aside on my phone and took it into the studio. I went, "I've got another song, guys." And they all went, "What, another one? Really? Really?" And I went, "Yeah, can we try it?" So we
kind of like Freddie Mercury coming up with another movement for Bohemian Rhapsody.
Not that I'm anywhere in that bracket, of course. But
No, but I'm just saying,
exactly.
Here's another thing.
And it was a bit like that. So I go into the studio, and I tell you, the only one that never showed no fatigue whatsoever is Phil. The guy is a machine. So he would get behind his drum kit. He is the most enthusiastic musician and most together musician I've ever met in my life. He's absolutely amazing. So we go in to work on this song, "Faith in Fools." I'm thinking to myself, this is one of the best things I've ever written. I absolutely love it. But the band are like this. They're like hanging. Their eyes are down here like that. Nick's asleep against the wall. Dave can barely turn his keyboards on. Well, that's like that most days anyway. But Sam's like looking like he just wants to. He's gone white. Like he can't play. His fingers have got blisters on. It's all that sort of stuff. And I'm stood there going, right, the chords are like this, guys. The guy. But Phil's like, "I love it. Let's go for it." And he starts thrashing away on his drum. And it's like, so we managed to get, literally, this is true, right? We managed to get one take. We went through it a couple of times, and I said to Chris, the studio engineer, I could see everyone was flaking. I said to Chris, "Look, just record it. Just record it, and we'll see what happens." So we recorded this backing track, and we've now used that backing track on this new album. Now, the only thing that survived was the drum track because it was so amazing, right? So Phil did this incredibly blinding. So I'm getting ahead of myself a bit here, because what happened is that the lockdown happens. I knew that we'd recorded a load of extra songs, because there was loads of songs we left off the Truth album, and it wasn't because they weren't good enough, it's because they just didn't fit that record.
Yeah.
And because I'd had a plan in my head to always make 2 records back to back anyway,
yeah,
I kind of envisaged that we would have two different types of records. So when the lockdown happened, I went back to my hard drive, I turned on my Pro Tools, and I started examining what we had, because I thought to myself, I am not sitting here for however long, because at the time people were saying, "Oh, this is only going to last 3 months or 2 months." And I just thought to myself, there's no way on earth you can have a pandemic, on a global pandemic, and it lasts 3 months and it all be over by tea time. It's never going to happen, right?
But we'll have tea and cakes. It'll all be finished.
And it'll all be okay. We'll all gamble across the top of the cliffs, and it'll be fine. So I thought we were in for this for a year. And I'd read up about the Spanish flu and how long that had taken to clear and all, So I started looking at my hard drive, and I listened to these songs and listened to these ideas, and I thought, you know what? There's an album here. It really feels like there's a great bunch of songs. And I contacted the guys, and I said to them, look, I sent them the list of the tunes, including "Faith in Fools," and I said, look, I think we've got a record here. And I did a bit of editing, and I tarted them up a little bit, and I mixed them a little bit at home, and I sent them, and they all went, "Oh my god, I can't." I remember Nick rang me up and went, "You know that song?" And I won't show the title, so I don't want to give all the title. He goes, "You know that song?" I went, "Yeah." And he goes, "I literally can't remember. I can't not even remember the title. I can't ever remember playing it ever." I said, "We did 6 takes of it, Nick." And it was just, and like it was because that was the blur, that was the song drunk thing. It's like we just couldn't see through it anymore, you know. So, but what we've done ourselves a favor. So what's happened is this new album, which hasn't got a title yet. I'm not telling you the title. I'm not allowed to.
Okay.
Album, we're calling it WS3 at the moment for code.
Ooh.
WS3.
Twa.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. So we looked at the tracks, and I sort of said to the guys, "Well, what do we think we've got here?" And we examined all of the tracks, and we all had opinions about it. But essentially, we recognised there was probably out of, I think there was 13 songs available, believe it or not. And we thought that 7 or 8 of them, maybe more, maybe actually it might have been 9. I think it was 9 songs. We thought, right, we can work on all those. These ones over here, they're not advanced enough, so we're going to put them aside. So what I then did was I sat down, and we then started working remotely. Yeah. Then we had the first lockdown came to a close, and we were able to go to studio. So we went to a studio and we worked on some of the tracks from a guitar and bass and keyboards point of view. Then we had the second lockdown happened. So I then, by that point, was able to sort of view the songs from a distance, and I started writing songs again. And I wrote 4 brand new songs for this record that we then, when the second lockdown came to a close, we went and recorded those songs. And then we went into the studio just before this third lockdown happened in the UK. Literally the week before, I booked 5 days in Vale Studios, and we went into Vale Studio. And I swear to God, I have never worked harder in my life. I was upstairs in the studio recording vocals. Sam was down in the main studio recording guitars. Dave and me were working through the night pretty much recording keyboards, because that's what we had. That's what we had to do. And then Nick was coming over in between and doing replacing bass tracks. It was absolutely nuts. And so I exited the studio sometime round about I think it was probably just before Christmas this year.
Yeah.
And then when the lockdown happened and all the rest of it, and all we've been doing ever since is finishing off the vocals at home and the mixing the album. And I got the master back from the album for the album back 2 days ago. So we're completely done. We're finished, and it's done.
Okay. Well, you can trust me with that if you want to send me an advance copy.
Can you hear that tumbleweed? Can you hear that?
What was that?
That tumbleweed? Huh? Oh, that tolling bell. Can you hear that tolling bell?
It just went by.
Can you hear that?
Now I've got to clear tumbleweeds out of my basement.
No, mate, you'll be the first to hear it when it's ready, pal. I'll tell you.
Oh no, that's great, man. I can't wait, because I'll tell you what. If I can be honest, that's what we do. We are honest people with each other.
We try.
The first album, I've mentioned this in the other thing. You'll hear this tomorrow. First album had zombies. Second album was kind of a satire, political satire thing with clowns. Uh-huh. And people are scared of clowns. And and then, but I found I was really the videos for the second record were a little more in depth than the ones for the first record.
Yeah.
And I really found myself just a little distracted, to where I was like, okay, all right, I can kind of get this. I can kind of get the songs. I like the songs, and everything. But as soon as I got the record and I played it front to back, I mean, it's kind of strange, but I have them sitting right here. But as soon as I got this second one, and I listened to it front to back, holy crap. And, it really hit me. So we're all very excited. The whole Wayward Sons family over in the UK, and we're all so excited to hear this new record and to have only one song so far, and how is it working with so far? How's everything working have you had much dealings now with Frontiers yet about the record, or?
Yeah, we started. I mean, I've got a great relationship with that label. I mean, they're not the biggest label in the world, as we know, but they're very supportive. And the great thing about those guys down there, Serafino and Mario, and specifically Nick Teder, who's in the US, actually, he's in Nashville. He's very, very, very. He's the front end of the whole project, really. Now, they leave me alone. I sort of said to them, look, I'm at my best when I'm firing on my all of my cylinders and I'm on my A game when I'm just left to get on with what I need to do, and they've respected that. And so
no micromanagement.
Yeah. So I sent essentially some unfinished mixes. We were doing tweaks on the mixes. I sent pretty much the whole of the album to them about maybe 2 weeks ago, and they instantly reacted to it. They think it's our best record. I think it's our best record. It's a different type of album. It's not, I would say, crazily. It's unlike either of the previous ones. Okay. It's got elements of both, but I feel this one's, and I know, these always sound like such tired cliches, but the thing is about cliches is they are absolutely inhabited by truth, So right. the matter is that I've been through a 3-album band process before. I did it with Little Angels. The first album was that raw album that you make when you've got nothing else to think about, and that's you put all of your life into it, Yeah. So that's what happens. That's what happened on Don't Pray For Me, and definitely what happened on the Ghosts album was that was our embryonic raw album. Second album, a little bit more thought about, deeper layers, wanted to try and figure out where we wanted to go with it. Third album, you crystallize the idea and the vision becomes a little bit more focused. And I do think that's what's happened this time. I think this is a lot more accessible. I think there's a lot more chances for us to get on the radio with this record a bit more. Yeah. I feel it's the most confident record we've made. And I absolutely love the songs. I think there is, out of all the songs on this record, I think there's probably arguably 2, if not 3, of the best songs I've ever written in my entire career on this record.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Entire career.
Right. I mean,
and I might be wrong. I'm not saying I'm right, and people might go, "What are you talking about, Jepson? It's rubbish." But all I can do is trust my instincts, and I feel very, very connected to this album.
I'll do my best not to say that to you at any time.
I don't mind. I've got thick skin,
and I'll do it in my crap British accent too. No, I'll use the Dick Van Dyke accent. How about that?
Please don't.
Do me a favor and don't.
I do like it when Americans try the English accent, because it's always the posh English accent. It's not a Yorkshire or from Birmingham. You know what I mean?
It is, because there's so many little things that make you sound like shite if you try the other ones. There's little bits, and I'm gonna get on it.
Very nuanced.
I won't even go there. It's just blah blah. Excuses is what it comes out to be. But I guess the last question on this too then is you got some tour dates, right?
Yeah.
And I was gonna, one thing I was gonna also make mention of, especially when you guys wrapped up that second leg of the tour, you did the Steel Panther tour. When that wrapped up, there was a lot of talk and a lot of folks that were kind of wondering. And again, these are just questions that people who love your band ask. And there was a lot of questions and hoobity-ba about whether or not you guys should be trying to get a headline tour versus playing a show that didn't even end up happening.
Yeah, I mean that's always the conversation. I mean, when you're in a band on the climbing, you're climbing the trails. Mm-hmm. You take your opportunities when they arrive, and the fact of the matter is, it's a very simple scenario, really, for bands. You've got to get in front of as many people as possible, right. And so I'm always and Little Angels did this. Little Angels opened for more people than we ever played live shows of our own. I mean, we did a lot of headline shows. We did at City Hall. We were playing Hammersmith Apollo and those size gigs, but we did a lot of touring with other bands: Van Halen, Bon Jovi, Marillion, Cinderella, that so many tours. Brian Adams, you know, we took, and that was a big part of the reason why we succeeded, because we were playing in front of a lot of people. So you have to take those opportunities when they arrive. And, you know, it's an absolute fact that it's better to play as an opening act in front of 3,000 people than play a headliner in front of 100. Now that's just fact, you know, but I totally recognize and utterly understand the need to headline, because you don't want to be the perennial constant opening act. It becomes, you don't have enough. You don't have enough. There's not enough what my agent would call currency. Your currency isn't very strong if you're a constant opening act. So we are, you know, we did plan to have an opening, a headline tour this spring 2020 in spring of 2020, but of course it got cancelled. We had it all booked and everything. We were about to announce it when we got back from the tour, you know, so we couldn't do that. And of course, then all the festivals went to the wall.
Download. We were supposed to be at Download. We're like,
listen, Download's going to happen again. I mean, Download, we are going to be. I mean, how cool is this? When Download comes back, Wayward Sons are going to be the first band to play at that festival when it opens. We're opening the main stage on the Friday, so we are going to be the band. We're going to play the first notes of any band on that event. So that's a real privilege, and I feel very. Andy Coppin, who's the guy that runs that show, has been incredibly loyal to us. And he said to us, look, that's your slot. You've got that slot. You'll have it no matter when we do this festival. So that's amazing. But we've just picked up a few festivals this summer. I mean, hopefully, because we've got like a roadmap out of COVID now. We don't know if it's 100% yet. We're all edging our bets, of course. But we are going to play. We have been booked to play Steelhouse Festival, Rock and Blues Festival, which is quite a big one in the UK, in Derbyshire. And also, we're playing the Party for Stone Dead, which is a new festival, which is in Lincolnshire, which is an indoor thing. So we're hoping all these things are going to happen. I've agreed to do them. If they do happen, it's going to be a great opening gambit for this new record. Yeah. But when we hit November, when we hit the autumn, I'm pretty much certain that tour will happen, no matter what. I think that is going to happen. So that goes through. I think we've got eight or nine shows, something like that. And then really we're looking at 22 as being the big year for this record. I think we'll go into 22 with lots of summer festivals and then lots of touring. Opening. We're talking to a couple of bands about opening in 22 at the moment, and more headlines. It'll all depend on if this record gets received well.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm going to do everything I can. I mean, I'll be talking about it every frickin' day if I have to on this channel. I mean, that's kind of the beauty of this, is that's what I'm trying to bring. I'm trying to bring about some things that can really make a change and a push. And you don't have to do a big, long show. You can just, poke a show out there, just do a short little episode. And it's all about this song or this album or this band. I think, what was I going to say? You know what? You guys, I have no question as to how awesome your headlining show is going to be, because I've seen a headlining band open. Okay, that's how I describe it.
Oh, I appreciate you saying
you guys in just an opening situation, and how you guys take control of a crowd and how awesome it is. So my other thing is I'm really eager to find out, and you don't have to, obviously you won't say anything right now, but I'm really eager to find out who you guys take with you and who's going to be able to join your circus and have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, no, we love that. I mean, and I love to find, one thing that the Little Angels always did back in the days, we refused to take substandard bands. Not that and I mean that with the greatest respect, but right. We always wanted to find a really cool happening band that could help the whole thing. I'm not in this world of we'll find someone rubbish so they make us look good. It's ridiculous, Right. I've tried a few different things before. We had a comedian opening the whole of the show tour when we headlined our first tour with on the Ghost album. That went down great, and that was really good fun. And then some local bands I'm looking at the moment at a number of bands. We've had every single band in the UK ask us to open for us, which is a real compliment, actually.
It is.
So I'm just looking. I'm keeping an open mind. I'd like to try and find someone young that's got something really unique that can blow everybody away. Because I think the only danger that we might have is just kind of taking a band that are similar to us, and I don't think that's probably the right thing to do. I'd rather give people a real good evening of like, oh, I didn't expect that, you know.
Right.
And that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of people that have talked about some classic bands like Rush, Kiss, and other bands that have Van Halen, taken bands out that weren't, you know, you're like, really? They opened up for them? And you're like, that's interesting, because you're right. I think as long as it's something within the I hate to use the word, the wheelhouse, you know, it's something that, you know, it doesn't have to be the same, but something that's equally as exciting.
Yeah, something that's equally interesting. I mean, I think it's all about being standalone. I think every band should think about that. Like I said earlier on, I think everyone's perspective should really be, we want to be a standalone band. We want us to be us. And I think if I can find another band that are like that, then they're not going to be, you know, all they're going to do is add to the night. You know what I mean? They're not going to take anything away, you know, it's, they're going to add to it, you know.
Well, and I'll just let you know now that I think there's this guy who hosts a show. It's called Hammer Away, who would love to be the announcer for your headlining shows.
I've heard really terrible things about his attitude, though.
I know he's an ass.
Yeah,
but he's dynamic. He's got great hair. That's what I hear.
That's got great hair. He does great hair. Yeah.
He's an ass, but he's easy to get along with.
Yeah. And don't mention his fast hair. So we don't go there.
What's up next for you and Dave as far as the Toby and Dave show?
Well, we've got a few things, and we've got a sort of comedy thing we're working on at the moment, because me and Dave have this kind of like very wry, dry sense of humor that we really, we sort of like egg each other on like two stupid sort of infantile schoolyard children. So we're sort of planning a bit of a thing with that at the moment, which we're going to try and do something with, because I think, you know, I'm really interested in sort of broadening the whole process of what this is all about, you know, and entertaining and all the rest of it. So I think we might do something like that. But we constantly work together, me and Dave. We're co-writing partners. We've written a lot of songs together over the years. He's co-written a lot of the songs for my solo record that I'm working on at the moment. Not all of them, but quite a few, and he will play all over that record. He will be the piano player on that record. So, you know, and we're working on a couple of movies together at the moment. You know, songs for films, and so lots going on, lots of exciting things. But soon as the lockdown thing really comes to a close, and I can find a window of opportunity, we will go out and play. I've got a plan to do like a Kitchen Busker live gig tour, like a live tour. Wow. So we will take a backdrop that is looks exactly like my kitchen. That's the plan.
Exactly.
And to go and play the whole thing and relive the opportunity. You know, relive the experience. And
I'd love to see one of those shows.
It'll be great fun, because the great thing about them is that it's built off a sense of real community. You know, and people send in questions and we have conversations. So I'm sort of thinking what I could do is I can get people on the stage and we can have conversations with people on the stage. They can ask me questions and they can sort of say whatever they want to say. Me and Dave do a bit of our comedy routines and do whatever we're going to do. But in between it all, we'll just do some great playing, and we'll just play some tunes, and it's kind of an evening with type of thing. That's the sort of idea, really.
Oh, that's wonderful, and that's kind of the feeling that we grew up with too. You know, with variety shows and music and skit stuff, or, you know, just some funny bits and, you know, and all that.
I just say, why not? You know, I mean, I kind of get bored. I'm not really a great acoustic guitar player. I'm a bit of a strummer, really, and I think there's only so much of that you can listen to. So I kind of feel the stories and the anecdotes and the kind of the banter is actually what gives it its edge a little bit, really. And I enjoy it when I'm doing it like that. I really enjoy it. You know.
Yeah. I'll never forget one of your first ones you guys, or one of the pieces you guys did when you did the holiday show, and Dave had his turkey hat. I love that.
Yeah. That didn't go down too well in the ranks of Wayward Sons, I have to say. I think Nick's exact quote was, "He looks such a tit in that turkey hat. It's not doing as." So
I could see Nick saying that.
But yeah, you know, listen, Dave's a natural comedian. I mean, he doesn't even have to say anything. He could literally talk. He could get the phone directory out and just read it, and I'd be rolling around in the aisles. He's so funny, you know. He's just one of those people, you know.
He and James Earl Jones, right?
Oh, mate, honestly,
for a whole other reason.
Right. Yeah.
Well, then I have we'll wrap this up, and then you hang with me for just a second after the show. We'll do that. But one last, I know I have to ask this question. One last huge inquiry, if I may. Is there any use of us fans holding on to the thought of a Little Angels reunion, no matter how limited it might be?
You total bastard.
I am a total bastard.
Well, I mean, it's been talked about. I said this on my show last week when we were doing the Young Gods thing. We were actually thinking of doing some live shows this year to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Young Gods. But of course, it hasn't come to pass for all the obvious reasons.
Right.
So the next logical step is to do it in 2023 when we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Jam album, which probably makes more sense because it was the #1 album. It's when we were at our absolute height. And so I think there is a conversation to be had there. But as ever with anything to do with the Little Angels, we protect it very, very carefully because it's an intact legacy. You know, we didn't disappear into the mire after doing big shows and go down and down and down, so we'd end up playing to 50 people in clubs again. We split up at the height of the band's success. Now, a lot of people say that was madness doing that. Of course it was, but that's the legacy. The legacy is that we ended at the top. And so whenever we do anything, we want it to be regarded with some heft. It has to have some heft behind it. So I think if we are going to do it, it's likely to be around that period. And there's been conversation about re-recording, not writing new songs. I must stipulate that. We have had some conversations about potentially maybe re-recording some of the classic songs in not a different style, but reinventing them for the modern world.
Kind of a reimagining.
Yeah, that sort of thing. I actually hate that term, to be honest, but that's exactly what it is. It's like it's about
just a reworking.
What would we do if we went into a studio today, knowing what we know? How would we look at these songs? And I think that could be quite interesting. And we've had a few people, a couple of labels ask us about that. But it's all conjecture at the moment. We don't really know. It's all dependent on everyone's lives and how it all works out and availabilities and stuff like that. So it's a possibility.
Well, I know for anybody here in the States, I bought a copy recently and it's very affordable. There's actually another album I'm going to be talking about on another show. But I do want to look this up because it is an affordable piece that I would love for people to check out. There is the, it's actually gone. Never mind. It's kind of gone up in price. I bought it for like $9. Now it's up to $20. You're Little of the Past.
Oh, the best of. Yeah,
the best of has gone up in price. So, but do yourself a favor.
Currency's going up, mate. What can I tell you?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So check it out, though. There's a couple of them used out there for a little less, but check out the Little of the Past in order to give yourself a view of Little Angels, before before they move on with something else. Possibly.
It's a good entry level, that is. I mean, we've had all of the albums re-released by various little catalog companies, Cherry Red and various other people, and Lemon Music, I think it was, and so that they will probably reappear again at some other point as reissues. But we don't own that music. That's the sad thing. Sad thing about the music business is that when you're a band and you sign to major labels, essentially, unless you make lots of money and you recover all the costs, you don't end up owning your own music, which is exactly the situation we're in. We don't own those. We don't own those recordings. We can't use them. So.
Oh my God! Oh, so that kind of happened with Styx too, right? I think when they did Lady in 1995 for their best of, because they couldn't put the original on it, they re-recorded it.
Yeah, that's what happens to most bands. It's one of those things. It's
crazy.
Until you've recovered, they've recouped their money, they won't give you the rights back, because and I can't really blame them for that to a degree.
No, I know, I get it. I get it, which is the reason why there's all this talk about the music industry now, but I know everything, but I've changed it a little bit from music industry to now it's kind of back to the industry of music, because we're not depending right now on big corporations and companies as far as all musicians anymore. It's not the music industry anymore. It's kind of back to the industry of music, where you're being industrious with whatever you can musically to make experiences happen that then will profit you.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think that's, the more it changes, the more it stays the same. I think that's the way it was way back in the day. And it's the way it is now. I think people like myself are a good example of it. I mean, the most amazing thing is that I can hold a small business together as a solo artist on a very, very dedicated, loyal fan base, which is not particularly huge, but they're dedicated to you, and they like your music, and they're willing to support you. And that's the big change, is that means I can maintain myself as an artist, developing artist, outside of everything else that I'm doing. So, and that's an extraordinary privilege, actually. I thank my lucky stars every day that I have the fans I have, because they're so dedicated to me, and it's an extraordinary privilege. It really is.
Yeah, I have to say I don't feel that, if I can just be the guy that goes, oh boy, you don't let the people down. You guys, and even in Wayward Sons, you guys don't let the people down on what you guys are doing. The energy is there, the music is there, the playing, the camaraderie is there, and it really draws you in. I'm really looking forward to anybody who's out there. Like George said, I turned him on to Wayward Sons, so that's cool. And some of these guys are in Canada, so we got to get you a Canada leg going too. And,
well, we're going to come on. Listen, as soon as I can get there, as soon as it's like I said to you before, we've discussed this many times. It's like, it's just so difficult getting to the US. It always has been. It's one of those things where it's incredibly expensive to do it for a bunch of unless you kind of got the support of a major label or the support of a major promoter, where they can bring you in, and you can. And I do have one of the greatest agents, if not the greatest agents in the world, in Mr. Steve Strange, who's a very close friend of mine. He's one of my co-managers. And if anyone gets to America, it'll be Steve. But Steve's very wily. Steve's very smart. He won't do it unless he knows it's going to help us. Because you don't want to be spending fortunes getting there for it to actually not make any waves. So we've got to make sure that when we do it, I mean, for me, the ultimate thing would be to open for, I don't know, we come over and we open for a Saxon tour, because I'm big mates with Biff, so like, Saxon go and do a tour. Yeah, we get that opening slot. They play up and down the country. We do that. That's worthwhile, because we'll be playing in front of thousands of people.
Well,
introduction.
Put me in touch and let's start that conversation, because there's no reason we can't make this third time a charm. We should just make it your third time's a charm tour.
And I've played in America quite a bit, not a lot, but I have played, and whenever I've been in America, it's always such a joy. I mean, it's a different feeling in Europe. It's the heart and soul of rock and roll in lots of ways, and I've always felt that when I toured over there, with Dio's Disciples a few years back, and that was an extra, doing all the House of Blues, and it's amazing, and it's a different feeling, and it's it's something I'd like to feel again before I pop me clogs, put it that way.
Pop me clogs. That's a brilliant way to end.
You don't know what that means, do you?
That's a brilliant way to end. Me going,
Yeah. She's been brilliant, mate. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you very much for the time, and thank all the guys for me as well. And tell them I can't wait to tell Phil I can't wait to embarrass myself again sometime.
Oh, you're good, man. Don't you worry about that. You're golden. It's all good.
All right, my friend. Well, let's get. Adele's wondering what's the next single.
Oh, well, we're about to announce that probably about the next 2 or 3 days, actually. So I can't tell you till then. So very, very soon, Adele.
Not a problem, but that's coming in the next few days. That's good to know. Good. And I just needed to make sure I didn't get in trouble with her before we got done.
And I will say this: I think it might surprise a few people.
Interesting. All right. Well, Even the Score is the name of the track that's out there right now. So go out there and check it out. Papa Pete up there in Canada, He and his wife Chrissy love it, and I'm sure you guys will too. And then just do yourself a favor, get yourself a copy of these first 2 records. You're going to hear lots of chat about those on the interview that I did last year with Toby, and I'm telling you, get ready to see them live because these guys are a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Thanks,
All
Mike.
right. Thanks to everybody out there. I really appreciate the chats and the questions. Remember to subscribe, and we'll keep this thing rocking and rolling, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you, Toby.
Cheers, guys.